Hello there, my bitches, bros, and non-binary hoes. I hope you all are having a wonderful day, as I am having a wonderful day. Now, as I stated, now's the next official stream. I'll be changing up the intro. We're ignoring that right now. But I would like to thank you all and welcome you back to Deeper and
Yeah,
Darker.
Shad. Yeah, Shad, what happened to that intro change?
I'm gonna beat you with a stick. That's it. I'm getting me mallet. I need to get that as a fucking model thing where I just have a hammer in front of me. Beside the point. But yes, welcome to Deeper and Darker, where today we're going to be discussing Werewolf the Apocalypse with my boy Riv here.
Hello.
I say we have done a little bit of things in the background. I basically stayed up ever since last stream. I've been doing nothing but research, which I need to start doing these things in fucking preemptively, which is fine, but you know, it's just how it goes. Because I forgot how much information there was in Werewolf. Holy fuck.
Yeah, it was kind of one of their more popular settings, so there's a lot to get a
Yeah,
fuck on.
30 years of
Remember,
information's a little bit.
yeah, remember there are three games that in the original run of the game got their own got their own like set like game specific like end of the world book, and Werewolf was one of them. Oh, that reminds me. Something I
Yes.
wanted to clarify. I want a Predator retraction. Um two
Huh?
retractions actually. First,
Okay.
technically the with the ad break, fuck. Technically
It's
the
fine.
I love how he said I want to print a retraction and immediately goes to an ad
It's
break.
fine.
No, it's just kind of funny. Um, the Bali are technically still canon vampire clan. Paradox just vetoed making them playable.
Okay.
Um,
There's a
two,
few tribes I'm gonna talk about that are like that as well.
yeah, I know there's a tribe that they fucking retconned. I know that.
That's
I know that
three or
very
four
personally.
actually.
Really?
Oh, there's a few.
I'm sorry. There's one big one that they overtly removed.
Oh yeah, they
That
did.
was yeah. This just and like people were pissed about it, but like
So if
that's a whole debacle in and of itself. And
we'll
that's
get
not the
into
retraction
it,
I'm here in front of.
we'll
The
get
other
into.
retraction is that the remember how I was describing one of the possible like recommended end game scenarios from the source book?
Yes, the one with where your heart starts beating, the one where you're basically like where
Okay.
Kane's like still
The
in the
point
desert and shit.
is that entire thing is very much like just a suggestion from the people at White Wolf. The real answer to where is Kane is he's wherever the DM fucking says he is.
Kane is wherever. AK he might be driving a cab in LA for
Yeah,
all we know.
you motherfucker! You made a Bloodlines reference.
Hey! I've been watching people play Bloodlines a lot recently, and I figured I might as well do some looking into it. I
I
do
look forward
really
to
want to
doing
play
this
the
while
game.
I look forward to
I
doing this on an ad break. This is great.
I really do want to play the fucking Bloodline. Like I said, it's fine. We got the VOD for later, and people can watch it as it stands without ads. But as it is stated, I would like to get into Werewolf, and I will say this is probably gonna be. I don't know if it's gonna be 4 hours. We're gonna try and I'm gonna try and aim for at least a little bit
Yeah.
below 4 hours.
Hey, you remember how like we used up those full 4 hours, and I gave you very shallow descriptions of bait of like 90% of shit,
Yeah, yeah,
and
we're gonna try and aim for that.
then you got half an hour to talk about the Quay Jin.
Yeah, we're gonna kind of go for that, which I also do have all my notes for them as well. So we're gonna start off, and let me get on to my next little page here. So I made a slideshow. I'm very happy about this. I spent time doing my work, but
Hey, it's an old
welcome.
cover.
Yes, I decided to go for the old cover because the new one's fine, but I don't really care. I'll say some of these images are gonna be nice, very nice quality. Others are gonna be grainy as all hell because they were photocopied directly from the book. So 50-50, you're just gonna have to live with it. But without any further ado, allow me to introduce you to Werewolf the Apocalypse, the one of the sister series to our good friend Vampire that we covered, as well as a few others. But we're gonna begin with a bit of a asterisk, like editor's note type thing here. I kinda will be delving a very small amount into Chronicles, into like a very, very small amount into the older parts of the series. Because the old World of Darkness, which I don't think we explained this last time. So there's the old World of Darkness and the new World of Darkness. New World of Darkness is Chronicles. We're not
No,
really going to be doing
that
covering
is
that.
not how that works. So
That's
there
how
are
I
actually
was told.
no, there are three of them. There's Old World of Darkness, which is Old World of Darkness.
Yes,
There's
the old.
Chronicles of Darkness, which is still technically owned by Onyx Path Publishing. but like it's also not, and it's a bit finicky with how the copyright in that works, because when White Wolf was sold to CCP Games, they like there was some stuff that got sold off to one of a publishing company they were going through at the time, which was Onyx Path, and they kept some of the rights to like Chronicles of Darkness, both first and second edition of Chronicles of Darkness,
Mhm.
and then White Wolf itself got bought out by Paradox Interactive, and now they're making New World of Darkness, even though they have like legal rights over Old World of Darkness, and they're taking a lot of cues from Old World of Darkness while also saving stuff from. Also taking cues from the experiences they had with Chronicles of Darkness. It's a bit of a mess overall. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I was gonna explain in a simpler way, but yeah, pretty much. As it stands though, we are covering the the newer World of Darkness stuff. Chronicles has got have a little bit sprinkled in there, a little bit of the old world, but it's majority going to be the new stuff, as I stated. That is our caveat for today. So if I say a name and somebody in the audience is like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right, there's a reason for that. It was probably renamed or changed. Because Werewolf, if I'm going to be completely honest, is probably one of the most changed games out of the entire series from what I've looked at. There are so many different canonicities and so many retcons that it was hard for me to actually get the names of tribes correct sometimes because of how many changes there have been.
Yeah, they did do that a couple times.
But we're going to get into what is Werewolf the Apocalypse. It mainly focuses on werewolves. Crazy statement, but they're not known as werewolves to themselves. They're known as the Garu or Garu or however you wish to pronounce it. I say Garu,
The first one,
but
the first one's closest to right.
yeah, I was gonna say that's normally how I pronounce it. But I've also heard people say Garu, and I'm like, that doesn't sound as cool.
Yeah, but you also, hear people like fuck up words all the time.
True.
Like,
We live in the South.
it's not that we live in the South, it's that we speak the language.
Jalapeno. We're getting distracted.
Tortilla.
Anyways, but go figure, werewolves are not friendly. They do exist in our modern world, and they don't exactly like the modern world all too much because they are originally created from one of five different ideals. So when I say that, basically mean that they are created from one, maybe two beings, and they worship slash like despise three. The main entity that they believe they're created from, depending on which faction you asked, is Gaia. And Gaia, very simplistically, is the goddess mother of the earth in werewolf understanding. Think of it like the Greek part of philosophy, where is just Mother Earth, Gaia. Small caveat, and spoiler alert, she might be fucking dead or on her last legs. We'll get into that deeper, but she's not doing hot. And they're also made by a secondary goddess known as Luna, or the moon itself. It is believed that some Garu are originally made from Luna itself or had a helping hand with Gaia. It's a little wishy washy depending on who you ask. We're still not 100% sure why, what, where kind of thing, but we'll get into it. Which reminds me, I need to get to my. There it is, my Gaia photo, which was not as super pain to. Two of my slides are mixed up, whatever. But as it stands, there are also three other entities, which I don't really have pictures of, sadly. I tried looking up decent photos, but all the ones I could find were not great, to be honest. Which we have three other entities. The Wild, which is a being of pure creation. And mind you, I will specify, these three entities aren't just in the world. They are in the penumbra, which is the most upper layer of the Umbra, which is the spirit world, like we discussed last time. But there is the Wild, which is a being of pure creation and unbridled creation. It is basically just kind of all over the place. It is pure energy. The second entity is the Weaver, who takes this wild energy, badumtish, and creates into something of control. Like, for instance, the Wild will start spewing out oil everywhere, and the Weaver will take this and crush it down and create into gasoline. And the third entity is the Worm, which we'll be talking about a lot of the Worm. It is an entity of pure fucking chaos. It basically takes whatever the Weaver creates and crushes it down back to its basic elements. So that oil that was turned to gasoline, well, now it's started an explosion. It's into a fire. It goes back and causes some sort of chaos in the world, releasing it back to creation. At least that's how it's supposed to work. There is a problem, though. Within the air quote recent years of creation, the ever so wise Weaver and its incredibly boundless wisdom decide to trap and try to subdue the worm in a attempt to only have everything be, controlled, perfect, created for humans and living beings alike. This resulted in the worm becoming corrupted, strangling against its restraints, and becoming a worse version of itself and starting to consume more and more, including Gaia, which resulted in maybe her death. We are not 100% sure about it, but she is pretty much dead at this point, as it can be confirmed by most Garu, and it is not going well for everybody. There are creatures that are associated with each of the different types of the three of the triad, which is what they're called. There are the vampires, which weirdly enough can be associated with the weaver or the worm, depending. It really depends on what media and what form you read. Different clans are part of different forms, as Garu see it, and as creatures of the weave see it. There are changelings, which are mostly of the wild, and wraiths are seen of that of the worm. You don't need to worship or be associated with these beings directly to be associated with them. It just depends on how the Garu see you. And to make it very clear, werewolf is about one major thing and one major thing only. Welcome to politics. I hope you like environmentalism. Big corporations suck and all that stuff. Which reminds me, let's talk about our big corporation of the game and our main antagonist. Riv, what do you know about Pentex?
Oh, I know. I actually know a decent bit about Pentex. I don't remember what its founder's name is, but I assume you have that written down.
Ironically, that's the one thing I wasn't able to find.
Fuck, I know he has a fucking name. All right, like, and the one thing I do want to say is you are fucking speeding through this, man. Like out here, gotta go fast.
I wasn't trying to. I just like spewing information quickly.
No, you're good.
I was about to say, if I remember correctly, yes, Pentex originally was a oil and mining company, but nowadays they're more of a shell company. Okay, I guess I'm a cat now. Okay, let me get my timer set up. Oh, thanks. Fucking
Well, I mean,
Telos.
they own a bunch of shell companies.
Yes, they do. And most of those shell companies tend to also own a large portion of other companies. So, say for instance, like, oh man, Pentex owns a large portion of like insert company here. We'll just say Amazon, for instance. They'll own like a large share of Amazon and be able to like be on the board of directors. The original Pentex, mind you, they started off as premium oil. If I remember correctly, oh, there it is. The founder of Pentex was Jeremiah Lasseter, and if I'm not mistaken, he was basically untalked, but he made a pact with the worm in its corrupted form and caused basically, if it's a problem in the world of darkness, $20 down, it's probably a Pentex issue. They cause a lot of the modern issues, both in vampire, werewolf, mage, because they are associated with all of those things.
Yeah.
If you were to go to the Pentex wiki page and scroll down, you'd be scrolling for a couple minutes to see all the stuff they have. If it exists, they fucked it up somehow. But I will say, Pentex has a large portion of the technocracy, which we'll be talking about later in Riv's episode over Mage.
Well, I
But
mean, truth be told, they don't have a whole lot of the technocracy under their heel.
no,
Or
it's more
with
they're on the board of directors from what I've read though.
a specific faction within the technocracy
Yes,
is on the board of directors. It's hilarious, and
it is a whole
I
thing.
thought I'm talking about that faction is going to be nothing but funny in context.
Oh, it's going to be great. But yes, Pentex is your evil mwahaha villain of Werewolf, which basically you're supposed to use in gameplay as an insert for whatever evil company faction you want to do. Like I said, in this case, Amazon, if you would like to be. How I have seen it mostly run is more of like a consulting firm, which I kind of like. I feel like that's very interesting. They've moved away from oil and all that stuff. They still do it, but that's more or less that's neither here nor there. I do like Pentex. They're an interesting villain if you do research on them, which I did a little bit. I didn't have them too much written down on my notes for them, but that's more of a personal issue for me. But it's however you would like to do that. But for now, I would like to move on to something a little more important, which we're going back to the Gaia photo, which we are going to be talking about the War for Gaia. Holy shit, if it exists in Werewolf, it's all because of Gaia. There is no other way of putting it, really. The entirety of Werewolf existence is threaded off of two things. One, Gaia good. Gaia mom. Gaia made us exist. Two, at least one of the three parts of the triad is evil in someone's comparison.
Well,
So,
some clarification on the matter, because
go
I do
ahead.
remember doing a lot of research into this like last year.
You can go ahead and do so.
Guy is the one that made the Weaver, the Wield, and the Worm.
Correct.
The Weaver, tired of entropy and the Worm constantly eating all of the pretty things it was
Yep.
making,
Chuck the worm in
stuck
prison.
it in a box.
Pretty much, which I addressed. Yep.
And you did all that. You explained all that a little bit. And the Worm was very pissed about that. The Worm is extremely angry about that.
It started thrashing, crashing,
The
and
th-
corrupting everything.
the thing is like the big difference isn't that there's one of them's the enemy for like werewolves. The thing to remember, right, is that the Worm is to nearly all of them is like outright the enemy, period, hands
It
down,
is.
no holds bar. And like sometimes
It can be.
people, and the Weaver is either like certain werewolf tribes like fucking love the Weaver, and
Selectively.
most of them are pretty indifferent on the matter,
It
even though
depends.
the Weaver is the one that caused all the problems in the first
I'll say, from
place.
what I've looked into, there are. It's actually more split than you make it out to be, from what I've looked into. A large amount of tribes hate the worm. That is pretty much overarching. There's
Oh
maybe
no,
only
no.
two tribes I've
Oh,
seen that are like allied with the worm.
te- technically one.
Technically one. There's two maybe, but I'll get into that. As
And
for
there's
the Weaver in the wild, everyone kind of respects the wild as it is, but no one really worships it like they do the Weaver. But a
well, no,
large portion are very split on whether they like the Weaver or not, because there is a
yeah,
large portion
yeah,
that very much heavily dislike the Weaver.
yeah. The Wield is like very much a like a neutral thing that they don't really attribute anything to,
It's a being of
and the
creation.
Weaver,
That's it.
yeah, and the Weaver is very much a controversial figure, to say the least.
Yeah, from what I've looked into, it's a bit of a fucking mess. But as we were, essentially the war for Gaia is the Garu will to kill and do whatever is needed to preserve Gaia, which they've kind of done a shit job at. During this war for Gaia, which has been ongoing since the Garu creation, there was a point in time called the Impergium. The Impergium was when all of Garu kind essentially went about culling the human population and other shapeshifters from the planet. This was mainly held by a clan called the Red Talons, which we'll get into them later. And a lot of tribes blame the Weaver and the Worm both for this time period, but in reality, it's just them being fucking morons. A lot of werewolves try to blame shit not on themselves, but on the higher powers that they see as, which is going to be a very ongoing theme, if you'll notice, so don't worry, we'll get into it. But the problem with this is that due to how the Impergium happened and how humanity was basically almost wiped out, they developed this very interesting thing called delirium, which anytime they see a werewolf in its true form will cause them to freeze, panic, scream, run. Hell, some people have even been known to go and punch a werewolf in the snout, which is instant death. Very, very poor idea. Do not do that. Which kind of leads us into my next point about how werewolves really think and function. So, we are going to be talking about two terms that are very relative to werewolves as a whole. These are called Harano and Hoglask. Harano is essentially werewolf depression. You have kind of lost your will to fight. You are more in terms of thinking of temperance, restraint, think things out, work with those around you. It's a calm emotion and state of being where the wolf inside you has kind of turned off, not fully, but enough to where you're actually able to think a little more straight. The problem with this is that Garu as a whole are not fond of the idea of restraint. They don't like that, especially young bloods in certain tribes, which are all about the other term I mentioned, Haglosk, which is the werewolf basically succumbing to a burning, ever pure rage. It is controlled, but it is still the point of I am willing to kill anything that gets in my way more than be able to think through things. There, mind you, they're still in full control. This is not the beast within taking over. This is not the wolf within taking over. This is just them entering a almost rage-like trance where they have full cognition. They're just going to burn and fight things. They see anyone who isn't willing to fight for Gaia and for those who aren't going to kill basically is wasting their time. It's the stupidest idea you could do. It is very a black and white kind of mindset. And I will note that a lot of people who enter Haglask are very stupid with their ideas, as a large amount of Garu tend to be either on the edge of Hoglask or tend to be like right in the middle. And we'll think of an idea of like, oh man, that's cool. I'm gonna go fight a vampire or go fight a mage. Normally, it resulting in fighting a mage, terrible idea. We'll discuss this later. But since we've discussed vampire, werewolves are stupid. They think that young, beautiful looking vampires tend to be the younger generation and the decrepit old ones tend to be the elders, which, as we know, is not the case. So they'll go and look at a Nosferatu and basically be like, oh man, that's an elder vampire. I'm gonna go try and kick its ass, and they kick its ass easy. But if you go to, I don't know, a rich business guy who's, Clan Tremere, you're about to get your shit kicked in. Like, it's basically the situation of you're listening to another werewolf across the bar brag about how they took down 3 elder vampires, and you're still having PTSD over the one actual elder vampire still screaming about Carthage. Not a fun time. Mind you, the idea of Halask was just recently introduced in 5th edition. It was not originally a thing before that point. So, we'll see how it goes. It's something I find very interesting, though I know others may not like it, as the werewolf fan base is very, very, what's the word I'm looking for here?
Particular.
Decisive. Yeah, particular is a good one as well.
Well, like,
they don't like change. They really, really don't like change in their product, and it's caused a lot of issues with later things.
to be fair, right? The first change, like major change they had to their product was Chronicles of Darkness.
Which I will say, good segues. We're about to talk about the first change.
Holy shit, that was a great segue.
That was a great segue. So
entirely unintentional, but like
it works. But no, go ahead if you have a thought. Continue.
No, I don't have a thought.
All right. Well, in 5th edition, it has been made where werewolves are a little more random than they used to be in old versions. In old versions, they used to come from normally like linear families, which kind of gave a blue blood feel. Wasn't the best thing. It was Habsburg type shit.
Kind of yes and no. Like
it really depended. It was kinfolk.
Very much there is very much the Habsburgian thing where kinfolk were more likely to actually produce werewolves. But simultaneously, like if kinfolk left the community and
just breed, it was able to do that.
Just had kids, there was still a chance they would produce werewolves.
Yes,
the big thing is I don't know. Are you going to cover the I don't remember what they're called, but the werewolf bastard children?
Yeah, I am. Okay, the Mephis. Okay. I will be in fact going over the Mephis. So I'll be covering them a little bit more when we get to actual werewolf forms and formalities. And I'll also be covering them a little bit when we get to another one of the tribes. But for now, like I said, we're in the first change. The first change is something I was saying. Basically, there used to be a thing called like kinfolk, and there still technically is, but it's a lot less gratuitous than it used to be. It's a little more tame. Things have gotten a little bit better. And they are normally unrelated to what tribe you're in. I will get into tribes later, as I keep mentioning. But as of right now, think of tribes not as a family and more of just a group. You aren't born into a tribe, you join one. But the first change is normally when a Garu is shifting for the first time.
I
Crazy
see that's
concept.
different.
Hmm?
Normally, you're born into a clan, or I mean, tribe.
No, it's been changed.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and whenever this happens, it normally takes place either during puberty, normally like during a puberty age is when the first change happens, and it will be your full first transformation into one of the 5 werewolf forms, which we'll be discussing in a minute, and how you interact with that. Depending on the moon phase, and mind you, it doesn't have to be the exact second the moon turns to that. It's got like a couple of days in between. It will result in what aspects you end up as. Normally, an aspects can be determined by either what personality you are, or can be completely unrelated, because a lot of the time when a first change happens, it's by a traumatic event happening, or sometimes it's just random or forced. It really just depends. But aspects don't always tend to match the Garu they get into. Sometimes people see it as, oh, the will of Luna and her picking exactly what you need in that time. And you'll grow into it. Other times it just doesn't really work. There are rituals to change your aspects, but it's seen as sacrilegious and incredibly heretical to all Garu involved. So it normally doesn't happen. On record, there is quite literally no records of it happening, and most people have basically forgotten it exists. But with each of the moon phases, there comes a different aspects, as I have mentioned. First one is Arun, which is known as the full moon or the warrior. All Garu kind of see this as like the purest form of aspects, and it's the idea of basically being on the front line. You are the warrior for Gaia. You are not here letting other people sit and do your work for you. You're a warrior. You're there to go fight, kill, maim, do what you need. A lot of clans see this as like the highest of the high. Clans, tribes see this as the highest of the high. Like I said, in Garu society, it's just kind of like the frontliner in all sorts of manner. But there are downsides to it, as basically you're only going to fight. And while werewolves love that shit, you get werewolves are strong, but they're not automatic machine guns are going to stop them type of strong. Or not going to stop them kind of strong. But next after that is the, mind you, I'm using the 5th edition symbol for this, so if it looks different, whatever, is Gilliard, which is under the gibbous moon and is known as the Scald. These are the storytellers, your diplomats, your politicians under the Garu, what was the Garu nation. They basically will do their best to sell you lies, to get the underhand, to tell stories about spirits and their conquering and how you can become a spirit maybe one day if you fight hard enough and do what you can. But in reality, anything works for them so long as you believe their current view. As long as they get the win, they're fine with it. They don't care how it goes. Next is the Philodox. The Philodox is the half moon and the judge. These ones tend to be the lawmakers, lawyers, any part of your formalized like rule-making government are what the Philodox embody. Normally, you can see them passing judgment upon those who break the sacred rules or are trying to decide what technically a sacred rule is. But the problem being is that a lot of them tend to argue constantly and take things very, very cautiously and advise temperance and taking things slowly, which results in a lot of the Garu people not really listening to them. And another problem is that they don't really understand the rules themselves that Gaia and their own societies laid out for them. So the problem is, how can you really trust someone when they're making shit up as they go?
Well, I
Man, it's kind of a
mean,
little too real to life. Phew.
they don't necessarily. I mean, they're doing the best they can.
They're doing their best. It's like real lawmakers. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. Next is the Ragabash, the new moon, or the rogues. These are your tricksters, the devil's advocates of the groups, and the general troublemakers of the Garu people. Normally, they're there to question the status quo, make the people of the Philodox or hierarchy tend to be very annoyed and poke holes in their ideas to make them, like, move along a little faster. The problem is they're also very rash and they don't think. So they'll normally go do something that has very long-term consequences in a very short time. For instance, a Ragbash will more than often try to, set fire to a shipyard. And oh wow, that's a terrible decision. And it wasn't, confirmed by anybody, but they did it anyway. And that just caused a bigger issue. But in the short term for them, they saw it as a great idea. Next is our final of the many aspects, being the Thurge. The Thurge is the Crescent Moon and the Shaman. They are pretty evidently easy to figure out for the most part. They're your shamans, your spiritual leaders, those who you go to when you need guidance from those who are not the political advisors. They have a very strong connection to the Umbra and will basically give guidance to anyone who really asks for it. They're very pragmatic in a lot of ways, but the problem is they tend to be so deep into the spirit world and spirit thoughts that it's very hard for them to see the real world. Spirit dedication, rules, bindings, all these things are more what matter to them because that's their world they are a part of. If a real world event is happening that doesn't involve spirits, why do they need to get involved? It's not their issue. It's completely useless to them, which leads them to be kind of useless in the long term, but we'll see how it goes as things do get further along, considering they're a bit of a mess in all honesty. They don't do their they try their best at least. But as we've talked about the many aspects, I think it is time we talk about werewolf forms and how exactly a werewolf is created. So, unlike in modern media and other popular thoughts, werewolves are not just created out of another werewolf buying another werewolf. It is not exactly a blood disease, but it can be depending on how you see it. It's really a perspective thing, but no, it's not being bitten. Werewolves are made by good old fashioned fucking. You can either be a human or you can be a wolf. Or there is a third option, which we will get into here in a second. But as it goes for humans, normally it is a human gaining the ability to shift during their first change into a werewolf, either by their family line or just fate of a very faint side family line. This will involve them turning into a wolf, or one of the many forms a werewolf can take. Normally, it's easier for a human to adapt to a wolf form than for a wolf to adapt to a human form, because wolves aren't thinking about turning into humans. But it is still something that can happen. And the third way of becoming a Garu is a little bit harder. The third.
One thing I do want to say, I'm sorry to
Go
interrupt
ahead.
you.
No, go ahead.
One of the things is that, especially in old werewolf lore, it's less that it was hard for the lupus garu to become, like, to go hybrid and go hominid form. It was more that there are just less wolves now than before, so they're statistically less likely.
Yes, that is true. I'll say mostly from what I read into for the new World of Darkness is mostly just they have difficulty adapting because a
And
four-legged creature,
literal skill issue.
quite literally, it's a skill issue. But there is also a third way you can become a Garu: skin one. If you are
Oh, they
able to,
kept that lore.
yes, if you are able to skin a Garu and you are able to wear its pelt and commit a very long ritual, you are able to meld yourself into its skin and you are able to become a Garu. There is a few issues with it. One, the ritual is heavily looked down upon, and any Garu that finds out that you committed this ritual will slaughter you. This is a no questions asked situation. If you are found out to have committed this ritual, they will fucking murder you. The second issue is that you are not able to use the full spectrum of werewolf shifting. You cannot turn to all 5 different forms I have displayed on the screen. You can only turn into the hominid, which is your regular human form that I'll get into in a minute, the lupus, which is the regular wolf form, and the Kyros or Cyranos. I'm saying that right. Cyranos, correct?
Ceranos. Or
Cyranos.
Ceranos, I guess.
Cyranos. Cyranos. You can only turn to one of those 3 forms. The Glabro and the Hespo are completely locked off you.
Yeah,
But
like I never remembered anyone talking about the Glarbo and the Hispo. Um,
they have their uses. They do
yeah,
have their uses, which we'll get
true,
into.
true.
Which
But
we are
like
going
I
to get
don't
into in
remember.
a second. Go ahead.
Okay, were they in the older edition of Werewolf? Because
Yes,
I
they
never
are.
heard anybody talk about them.
They are in the older edition of Werewolf, and they're also in the new edition. They are very rarely talked about, though. And as far as I'm aware, they also were kept in Chronicles of Darkness, but they were very, very bad rule set wise, so nobody really used them. We'll just see how it goes. But as of right now, we are going to move on to the first form of all Garu, or at least the form that majority of Garu tend to take in the modern age, the hominid, or as it's more well known, the human. I feel like I don't need to explain this one super in depth, but there are advantages to a Garu being human. One, you're still technically a fucking Garu, so if you get shot in your human form, you can at least take a bullet. Or 2 maybe. You're not gonna go immediately down. But that isn't to say that automatic weapons, yet again, couldn't fucking kill you. You can take a 38 or a 22, you're not taking a 5.56. That's a no bueno. But the key advantage to being in hominid form, or homid form, is that you still have your mind. You are completely a sapient being, and you also have hands. You have opposable thumbs, motherfucker. You can use tools, computers, doors. Don't you like rotating doorknobs? Crazy thought. You can get into places easier. There is also a very, very, nice advantage into not being pegged as a monster. If you're in
Pe-
one of the other forms, people aren't really gonna like you too much.
Pegged.
Yeah, shut up. It's easier to not be seen as a monster, create any disturbance, or have humans around you go into their hysteria versions. There is
Ah,
also
yes,
one.
delirium.
Yes, there's Illyria. There is also one other very large advantage to being in hominid form. The Bane of Silver is ignored for you. You do not take the Bane of Silver, which is a
Really?
problem with. Yes, every other
Jeez,
form has an issue with the Bane of Silver except for hominid form.
Oh yeah, no. Well, I knew that in old World of Darkness werewolves, like you could 100% carry a silver weapon on you, but if you did it for too long, you would just start taking damage. Like it would be that your soul is unironically just taking damage from you holding silver for like
As
an absurd amount of time.
as far as I'm aware, and as far as I've looked into, Hamid form can hold onto silver for as long as they need. They don't like being near it all too much because it does give them kind of like the icky feeling, but they can still have it. It will no longer deal soul damage to them as far as I've read into.
All right.
It's basically like being around a cockroach. You don't really like having a cockroach on your being, but like it's there. But next up, because we're going over the forms a little fast, but to be fair, these are kind of a lot of what I'm talking about is the smaller portions of things. The tribes are really where everything starts rolling in because they are massive. But next up is our good old friend, the lupus, the wolf. This one, yet again, is pretty decently self explanatory. You're a wolf. Yeah, that's the whole thing. You have your mind intact, but you have wolf-like abilities. So you can still make critical choices with your human mind, but you do also run off the instincts of a wolf. You're a little smaller, thankfully. You're a little more you're less vertical, more horizontal. You're able to go forward through things and stuff. And a neat addition to this is you're able to talk to other wolves and Garu while in wolf form. You can also talk to maybe other animals as well, but that takes a little more effort from what I've been seeing. So you'll see how it goes. Being in wolf form gives you More advantages in a few different ways. You can go very heavy into tracking, hunting, you're able to get into tighter spaces, you're able to blend with your environment more, so on and so forth. You are a wolf. And just like your hominid form, which is also more resistant than a regular human, your wolf form is also more resistant than a regular wolf. So yet again, you can take a bullet or two. You're comparable to the Hound of Baskerville, basically, or the Black Dog of European mythology, which we'll actually get into the actual Black Dog of European mythology here soon. So get ready for that. But like I said, they're pretty simple to understand. Not really too much onto it. Next is the Glabro. The Glabro, or the Savage, as it's referred to as, is the next step right after the Homid. Essentially, by this image, if you couldn't tell, you start gaining fur, your claws come out, you gain fangs, your durability is significantly risen in this form. This is the closest you can get without being in the war form or the Krynos. This does result in a few issues. Your mind is a little more wild, you're a little more in tune to your wolf or bestial side, which results in you not really being one to talk to. It's advisable not to talk to a glabro because they don't really care what you have to say. They're more just to get what they want. But that doesn't mean they lack all the sophistication of a human. They can still talk to you. I can't say it'll be polite, but they can still talk to you and they can still use tools and doors and stuff. But it's advisable to not do needlework. Probably not going to do much sewing. Gardening is very unsuggested in this form, so on and so forth. Delicate things are not a Glabro's specialty. And another thing to add is that the Bane of Silver does work on the Glabro. It does also work on the Lupus, but and how often are you going to encounter silver as a Lupus? So it's kind of one of those situations. But the Glabro is kind of like the step right before Krynos, which I will note, it normally goes Homid, Glabro, Krynos, Hispo, which I'm about to get into, and Lupus. It's not, it's kind of a weird arc, which we'll see here. But next up is the Hespo, or Hispo, depending on how to pronounce it. The direwolf form. This is the step right after, or technically before Lupus, depending on how you want to see it. If you're born Homid first, or if you're born Lupus first. Really depends on your perspective. And these are not something that would be mistaken as a Lupus, like how a Glabro would not be mistaken for a Hobbit. Neither of these forms look like their natural versions. You are large, you are dangerous, and you will be seen as a monster. They're more of a combat usage form more than anything, in all honesty. It's essentially a desperation plea if you're in Lupus form and really need to get into combat. A good way of seeing it is that Lupus form is more of the tracking speciality, while Hispo is definitely more of a combat speciality. Just as like how Hominid would be more of a tracking speciality, and Glabro would be an attacking speciality. It gets all the advantages of the previous form of Lupus, but it does gain the disadvantage of Glabro, which is your mind is more clouded. You cannot think as straight. The rage and animalistic urges take over just a little more. It's a bit much, but you will be able to keep at least some of yourself intact. I wouldn't suggest running around the city as one though, as that'll be more likely seen. It's more of a forest thing. But you know, werewolves aren't known for thinking the most straight and logically. Well, you know, it's fine. But finally, we have the most important form of all of werewolves, the one they consider to be the truest form, the height of all things Garu, the Krynos form, which is a terrible image, but it's full werewolf. You go full traditional seeing werewolf. The Krynos form, as I said, is seen as the height in all transformations for the Garu, which results in you using a lot of your bestial rage, which is the beast inside of you basically coming out and you're fully out there. You are the strongest you can become. which leads to a lot of cool things. You can take an assault weapon. You can take a lot of things. You can throw dumpsters pretty easily. Could you take a falling door? Well, if Vampire the Masquerade, Bloodlines anything to say, no. But probably. They're pretty damn strong. They are essentially the idea of the unstoppable force until they meet an immovable object, or at least until they stop being one. It's a whole situation. There is one massive caveat to this form. You cannot keep control of it unless you are committing murder, unless you are killing, unless you are committing war. It is a war form for a reason. If you see a Krenos form literally anywhere, understand something fucked happened and you should probably leave. If you can get out of there before it notices you. If not, good luck, you're probably dead. An interesting change they made in 5th edition of Werewolf the Apocalypse is that every turn you stay in Krenos form without committing a kill is a will point you will have to spend. Once you run out of will points, you will basically stop having control of your character in the most convenient sense, and you will start committing mindless slaughter to whatever is closest to you. They are quite literally a loose cannon creature that you can't really do much about. Which, as it stands, as we've covered now what the aspects are, how the first changes affected things, a little bit of general history when it comes to the Garu nation, it's time to get to the actual meat of things and how the Garu nation really formed. Or, well, let me be more polite. How the Garu nation rose and fell. After the death of Gaia, the Garu nation basically stopped existing, as all the other tribes saw it fit to kind of disband, because what are they doing? There's nothing more to follow. You can't do anything. Why would you bother? But we'll see how it goes from there. As of right now, though, Riv, as we have covered everything so far relating to werewolf history, and as I am dipping into Garu Nation, is there anything you would like to add? Any questions I can give you? Or are you good to proceed? And we can get into the
Mm,
tribes.
mm, mm. Yeah, you see, like, I'm not super familiar with Werewolf V5 lore, I'm not gonna lie. So, like, most of my experience is from, like, old world, werewolf lore, right?
Correct?
And, like, shit's real different, so I don't have much to add other than the comparison of shit's real different.
Fair enough.
Like to
As
the degree of in like old world, right? Like Gaia wasn't considered dead, it was considered like, not having a good time, to put it lightly. Um
hmm, I said I did look at that a little bit. It's why I keep saying Gaia is dead and or on her last legs is the big thing. Because as I've read in 5th edition, the worm is just consuming her. Like she's basically a husk at this point. And the Garu themselves have also kind of not helped her on accident by basically making her state worse consistently. So we'll get into a few of the tribes that kind of work off Gaia here in a minute, but it's a whole situation which we'll definitely have an interesting time discussing. But unless you have anything you would like to add or any changes you would like to commit to maybe talking about the old world lore, I am going to get started on the full part of the Garu Nation. Because
yeah, feel free.
this is the meat and bones, like I said. We are going to be going over a large portion today. So, as I said, the Garu Nation is no more, and due to the death of Gaia, everybody split up. Fuck off. No more parts. They are now individual tribes as it stands. And while they do commit politics and meetings with
Oh,
each other in their
wait,
sacred sites, yes,
wait, werewolf history. Were you gonna talk about how they had a why the delirium exists and how they fucked up royally multiple times over and over again?
I did talk about the Impergium. I have talked about that, which is the reason why delirium does exist. As for their many, 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 many fuck ups, I'll be getting to that individually when it comes to the tribes and what happened with them.
Oh no, I'm talking about the one they committed as the Garu Nation.
Did I miss something in my research? Because I'm trying to remember.
Did you talk about not like the Imperium where they kept purging humans over and over again to keep their population low? How some absolute fucking I don't remember who he was. This is probably old World of Darkness lore. How some fucking like mastermind, some absolute just unit of a shit-brained moron said to themselves, "Hey, the Garu, the werewolves, we're the guardians of Gaia.
Oh
We should
god,
also be
yes,
doing
this.
all the other work." And then they proceeded to go on a massive war against all the other changing breeds. By the way, which
Yes.
there are more of. And then they proceeded to kind of win. And so
So that
most of the
is
other ones are near extinction.
right. So that was something I did kind of cover talking about the Impergium because they changed it to where that happened during the Impergium now.
Okay, all right. Because
So
in old World of
yeah.
Darkness lore, those are two distinct, distinct and different events.
So how they've worked it in 5e is that 5e 5th edition is that there is the Impergium, and I think what they call it is the Impergium Formalis or something like that, which I'd have to double check, but which I can do right now. The Impergium Shiftalium is what they're calling it, or something along. Yeah, the Impergium Shiftalium. Basically, there's the Impergium, which was against humans, and the Shiftalium, which was against all shifters or other kinds. And essentially, they wiped all of their shapeshifters off the fucking map. Essentially, they still exist. It's just there's such a small party of them. They don't want anything to do with the
Yeah,
Garu Nation as a
yeah,
total.
even then, yeah,
Because
even then,
fuck the Garu.
there are some that are just gone now. They
Oh
are,
yeah, there are.
but
Which
like
it's
you
kind
know,
of rough.
there is like one or two of them though that's actually doing not awful for themselves.
There are. There are also a few over in Asia that are doing actually wonderful, which I will get into them when I cover the Asian version of Werewolf at Hengyokai. And surprisingly, Asian shifters are doing pretty damn good for themselves. Like freakishly good for themselves. Majority of them consist in like China, Korea, Japan, a little bit of India, but a lot of those areas are also taken over by our normal Garu friends. But again, we'll get into those a little bit in a second. But as of this moment, there are things you should know about the tribes. First of all, as I kind of stated earlier, tribes are not blood related, they're political parties. Tribes are essentially just all different ideologies, and if you prescribe to their ideology, they may let you in after some time of proving a little bit of, ritualistic pizzazz, all
Hey,
that type
hey,
of stuff.
hey, Shad, which one are you covering first?
I'm going to be covering the Black Furies first.
Okay,
I'm
okay.
doing it alphabetically.
Oh, okay.
I'm covering it
I'll
alphabetically, except for the two newest ones, the Gale Stalkers and the Ghost Council.
yeah, there's something I want to say on one of them, but since you're doing it
Sure.
alphabetically, I'll do it later.
Yep, all good.
I'll
Mind,
mention it when you go to cover them.
yeah, fair. So I will note that there is no best Garu tribe.
What are you
Putting that
talking
in
about? The Bone Gnars.
okay, yeah, true. I do like them. They'll be next. Well, technically after the Black Spiral, but again, we'll get into those. But I will say,
Are you counting them in this list and not like putting them
yes,
in the end?
I'm counting them in this list. I'm counting non-playables because there are only so in Werewolf in 5th edition, there are only 11 playable tribes. 13 of them are in total. I'm counting all tribes, but as I said, only 11 of them are currently playable. The ones that are not playable are the Black Spiral Dancers and
Yeah, no shit.
yeah, the Gale Stalkers and the Ghost Council. They are non-playable versions, which the Gale Stalkers and the Ghost Council are actually old tribes remade. I will get into them together for the most part and cover their old versions, but the problem with their old versions is that it's a whole fucking pot can of worms, and calling it a can is kind of polite. Somebody over at Paradox basically hired a sensitivity trainer and a cultural representative and a bunch of other stuff, and was basically like, "Hey, is this good to keep in the books? Is this a good idea?" And the response was, "I mean, yeah. It really depends on how the culture perceives it. Which people of the culture are going to be individuals and will perceive it either good or bad. And their best thought was, all right, we're scrapping it all and replacing it.
Oh yeah, so like what they did with the Get of Fenris.
Pretty
But
much. Yeah, yeah, we'll be getting into the
listen,
Get of
listen.
Fenris.
Their old logo was kind of unfortunate because they're not like Asian and have a good excuse, but simultaneously,
Yeah.
like they could have like just changed the symbol bottom text,
Yeah, we'll be getting into
like
the Get of
fixed
Fenris,
like
which
scalpel. Here's your
also
scalpel,
they
fix the
may not
problem,
be known as the Get of Fenris anymore.
which feels really weird given you know
Yeah, it's a whole thing. But moving on, we are going to be talking about the first major tribe, the Black Furies, who originally hail from Greece, if that kind of wasn't evident from the name Furies. They are an incredibly interesting tribe as they are a female only tribe. They believe in complete female supremacy. They do not give a shit about men, except for the very few male methists they have across their tribe. And I mean very few. This is a modern thing. This has not happened in the past. I did not cover methists in talking about the different werewolves, but I will now as they are coming up.
oh
Methists,
yeah.
I was about to say, Riv did talk about this a little bit earlier. Methists are half breeds, basically. They
Ooh,
are
that's not how I'd describe them.
they're fuck ups. I say this politely.
So
They are mutant fuck ups.
okay, that's kind of unnecessarily
It's a
mean.
little mean. But essentially,
A
Methus.
little.
Oh, it is. But to be fair, if I'm thinking like a Garu, I gotta speak like a Garu.
Listen, man. I'm gonna be real. All right, like it's not their fault they're inbred.
Uh, I wouldn't even put it as inbred. So what a Methus is, at least in the fifth edition lore, is they are the unholy union, air quotes, between two different types of Garu who broke the litany, which the litany is essentially a rule within werewolf society of, don't smash the other side of the spectrum, you fucking idiot. That's a
I'm gonna need you to
terrible
be.
idea.
I'm gonna need you to be a bit more descriptive because I feel like there's been a change and you just haven't described it very well.
Basically, don't be in Hamid form and bang a lupus.
Oh,
That is how modern methods are made.
oh, wow. Okay, that's exceptionally different from Old World of Darkness.
Yeah, it's a bit rough.
So what you're telling me is that like white women aren't allowed to be werewolves in this setting.
No. Mind you, there is also a large problem with diagnosis and hominid cubs. But there's a lot that
God,
goes into it. But to be
why did
boiled down is basically just don't smash the other side or don't
you
smash while
know
in the other side. It is.
Chad, you missed a real opportunity here.
I'm not doing the white women joke. I will
No, no,
say,
you missed a real opportunity. You could have done the white woman joke, right? And you could have had the slide be, there are two wolves inside of me. I'm a white woman.
there are two. Yeah, there are two wolves inside of some Garu. They're all furries. Um,
That being said, do you want me to describe what like Old World of Darkness these things
I
were?
in 1 second, I do want
Okay.
to make a slight thing as well. This
Okay.
does also mean, mind you, when I say don't bang as a Hamid and a Lupus don't bang each other, it's more of a Lupus took a Hamid form and banged a Hamid and vice versa. Don't do that. Bad idea. I don't directly mean like doggy style. I mean quite literally like, hey, if a lupus turns Hamid form and bangs someone who was originally created as a Hamid, that will create a Methus, and vice versa. If a lupus bangs a what ex Hamid lupus, it doesn't result in good factor. The problem with Methus as well is when they are born, they're born fully into Kairos form. They are born in the war form. They are mentally handicapped, physically handicapped, and spiritually disabled as well. As there's just so many problems with them. They are quite, I say this politely, they are the special kids of Garu society. And that is the reason actually why the Black Furies kind of take him in. But continue with your thought about how old World of Darkness methods are made.
Old World of Darkness methods are made in a much different way. In Old World of Darkness, they never brought up the issue of where did my little droid go? Yes. Oh, there he is. They never brought up or never addressed the issue of what if a Garu born as a wolf decided to bang a Garu born as a human. They never addressed that. That was never something they thought of. They did not think about that. What they did though is they in Old World of Darkness, of course, we mentioned it before, there's something called kinfolk.
Yes.
And in Old World, and the reason why they are so distinctively important in Old World Darkness for two reasons. One, when a Garu shifts into Keranos form, they are not afflicted by delirium, which is very important, deeply important. Two, um, the thing, oh, fuck, what are the rules called again? They're not the traditions, they're
It should be the litany, is what you're thinking
the
of.
litanies. It's whatever their name is, they're special rules. They had it as entirely as a werewolf is not allowed to bang another werewolf. End of story. For because it always produced one of those methods. They were not as mental. They were not mentally handicapped. They always looked like they had mange. They were always born in their war form,
Mhm.
and they were usually seen as a blight. And the only of the tribes, the only one that actually took them in Old World of Darkness was the Children of Gaia. They actively took them in, and by the time the setting started, right, that
Yes.
faction in particular, while they've always been friendly to them, with the dwindling numbers of the Garu, they had actually like certain more extreme members of that tribe had begun suggesting that maybe, while they're not visually pleasing and kind of abominations, they're just as in that setting they were just as effective as any other Garu, especially in their war form.
Oh, they still are.
May,
Trust me.
maybe they should maybe they should encourage Garu to bang each other. I'm making a little motion with my hands, you can't
Yeah,
see it.
yeah.
Because every time they did that, it would guarantee that their child's a werewolf. Even if they look like they have mange, it would guarantee 100% of the time.
I would say, yeah. In this terminology now, in the modern edition, werewolves can bang. It's just you can't bang one or the other side. If you do
Man,
that, it's bad.
that's a rip.
Um, it is also noted that I did say Memphis are mentally, physically, and spiritually handicapped. They are heavily. But they're basically Ogren. For those of you who know what an Ogren is from Warhammer 40k, they are essentially Ogren, and they act like Ogren. They are basically big werewolf children, essentially. Which, as it is now, modern wise, the Black Furies and the Children of Gaia do both take them in. The Black Furies take them in for a few different reasons, but we'll get into that later. It's a more modern thing, like I said. But to address the Black Furies, as I said, they are an all-female tribe. Their patron or totem, depending on how you wish to see it, is Gorgon. But in some cases, some also see it as Pegasus. It really depends on your perspective and what time period you're looking at. Originally, it was Gorgon until Gorgon kind of faded off. Because this is a whole story I'm about to get into. So, the Black Furies are very heavily linked to Greek mythology. All of their oral tradition is spoken. They have no written tradition because they see the Weaver as the enemy. The Weaver is a problem just as big as the Worm, and they fucking despise it. This led to them originally being created by Artemis and Luna. They see themselves as the children of Luna and know that Artemis is originally their patron deity. This slowly changed as so on slowly that Artemis left. In the old World of Darkness, depending on how you see it, their main and still patron is Gorgon. But recently, it has been changed in the New World Darkness to maybe be Pegasus. It really depends on how you want to run your Black Furies. Because Pegasus, as of current, is their main patron. Because Athena, who both as an actual god and as a werewolf or a Garu, essentially subjugated Pegasus into becoming their totem, which was a whole process that involved the death of Artemis and the last of the Medusae, which were the original Garu of the Black Furies, and also a lot of problems with the Red Talons, who we'll also get into, who have caused
Uh,
a lot of problems. If you'd like
Yeah,
I was gonna say, if you'd like to know who the main players are in Garu society, it's essentially the Silver Fangs, the Red Talons, and if you really want to get into it, technically the Children of Gaia, but I'd also consider the Glasswalkers to be kind of important. That's just because I like the Glasswalkers. They're kind of cool. We'll get
yeah,
into
the
them later.
Glasswalkers are cool, but I hate them.
Oh, I agree. They're fucking assholes, but we'll get into them. But as it stands, they also a lot but in their earlier history also helped the fall of Rome. Along with the Fianna, or as they're now currently known, the Children of Gaia, and the Fenrir, which at the time were technically the Red Claws, but that's a whole fucking thing in itself. And I make
Really?
they were technically okay. So how it's described in fifth edition is that the Fenrir are the Get of Fenris, and also a small splinter faction of the Red Talons that then reabsorbed back into the Red Talons. It's a whole fucking thing. They made it incredibly fucking vague and obscure. But throughout a lot of the Dark Ages, they basically just were very condensed. The main goal of the White Furies, the Black Furies, is protecting women. They are your hardcore feminist. They're all about protecting women, their rights, their existences, their faith, but they're also really big on the idea of motherhood, and they see it as kind of a freedom and a rite of passage for a lot of Garu females that join them.
Damn, women
During
in the
the
right, in the right
during the
point.
I would say during the Dark Ages, a lot of the Black Furies were actually burned at the stake because they were thought to be witches, alongside many vampires too during the Inquisition, as we mentioned last time.
Damn,
And during
werewolves
the
catching strays.
and during the Victorian era, they came over to the New World with many other of the Garu nation at the time, when it was still a foundation. And they met the Pure tribes, which we'll be talking about later, who have been renamed. They were the original native tribes of the Americas, and crazy enough, the Black Furies were actually the most friendly to them. The Black Furies were on very good terms with the Pure tribes, and to this day, it is still considered that the Pure tribes have actual good faith in the Black Furies. The main reason for this is because they weren't assholes to them. Very easy to be nice and diplomatic when you aren't a fucking dick. But slowly but surely, the Black Furies started to split into two different major factions: the American Furies and the European Furies. They kind of split due to obviously being on two different continents, but they also grew different philosophical ideologies. One kind of started to absorb a little bit into the pure tribes, where they decided that the world itself was kind of a pure spirit. And the European Furies were just like, I fuck the Weaver and the Worm. We need to all be powerful, like military warriors. And they actually fell very heavily into the European Industrial Revolution and many military conflicts, including the Second World War. Many female soldiers that actually did somewhat appear in the first and Second World Wars were actually probably Black Furies. And as of modern times, they've kind of become problematic.
Go
A
on.
small section of the Black Furies essentially got corrupted by the worm, and now they live in the Baltics and may or may not have joined the Shadow Lords. So that's a big issue. And they also recently had a massive battle with Baba Yaga in Russia, which resulted
Yeah.
in.
I forgot to cover Baba Yaga in Russia, but like that was a Nosferatu thing, and I needed to move on at the time.
Yeah, you're fine. We can cover it a little bit probably another time because she does come up quite a bit actually.
We
But
can cover her as her own thing. The Iron
yeah,
Curtain is something we can do later. I'm sorry, the Shadow Curtain is something we can talk about later.
yeah. But yeah, the Black Furies fought Baba Yaga, and it resulted in a very large portion of their numbers getting fucked. Not in the good way either.
Oh
But
my.
interestingly, oh my. But interestingly, a lot of the Black Furies actually have settled in Oklahoma and further southern regions, such as Central and Southern America. And due to a interesting thing called the Wild Plague, which we might get into a little bit more later, it's essentially where unfiltered pure creation has started to kind of infect different Garu tribes, it basically caused them to have a very weird issue of birthing Methys. Lots of Methys. So they're kind of cursed to it. And this only really started happening when Medusa, one of the 5 Gorgons, which the Gorgons are the heads of the Black Furies, disappeared. Which resulted in the 4 different parts of Gorgon, their actual patron, to split into 4 distinct parts. And it's a very large mess. As it can be said, the different camps of the tribe, which camps tend to be subsections, are split into different portions. While I will not get into each of the different camps, I will tell you their names. They are the Amazonians of Diane, the Avenging Mothers, which, yeah, the Bacchantes, the Freebooters, which are
The
pirates.
Baka Knights.
Yes, the Bacchantes. They are current, in contrast to the Amazonians, they are a conservative faction and believe that they basically should just be a ceremonial faction more than anything else. The Freebooters, as I said, who are basically they're Congolese pirates. They're basically Congolese pirates.
That's amazing.
The Moon Daughters, who are all about basically helping Gaia and Luna. The Order of Our Merciful Mother, Sisters of Battle, am I right? The Sisterhood and the Temple of Artemis. There also do have their cairns, which cairns are sacred sites to each of the different tribes. And most of the ones for the Black Furies tend to take place either in Greece of their homeland or Africa, Russia, and South America. Specifically, there's only one really important one in America, which is the Sept of the Moon's Blessing, but it's important, but not important enough to get into right now. As I said, the tribal culture for the Black Furies is very women first, men L, but it's kind of been like pushed a little bit to the side for the pure reason of the Methys being born to the tribe and a lot of Garu mothers, which Garu and the Black Furies have 3 ranks, being maidens, which are Garu females who have yet to have children, mothers who have had children, and crones who are too old to have children. And the Methys do not count for any of these roles because Methys can be born of male or female proctitude. It's just the male ones are kept because the mothers who have given birth to them feel terrible for them and would like to keep their children close. They are very heavy on motherhood, as I mentioned.
But if they're normal, they get fucking ostracized. Of course, yeah.
Yes.
Fucking.
Quite literally, it has been well known that the Black Furies will throw their children who are male either A, into another tribe immediately and tell them take care of it or else, or kill the child, depending if they're more of an extremist.
So they're modern feminists.
Yeah, they're a little rough. There are some more liberal parts of the Black Furies who will raise a child up at least until the age of 10, I think. 13, I think is the first I have read about. And then basically tell them, go make your way in the world. But mind you, that is such a small section that they don't really count. Their political structure is also a fucking mess, which I did mention there are different rankings, but they added a bunch of different tenets to the litanies, which essentially are don't hurt women and make sure the wild is all good and nice because the other 2 guys are assholes, and protect the weak, like be nice to your parents, yada yada, all that stuff. They're fine. I think they're interesting personally. They're not faction I would be part of.
I didn't look much into the Black Furies when I was looking at Old World of Darkness lore. I do know that like they have the same basic vibe. They were all female, but I didn't look too much into it because I had other things I was looking at like mage and
yep,
a little bit of demon and changeling and mummy and vampire and other werewolf shit.
Right. Fair enough. So next up is a tribe that is no longer playable and has never been playable. But they were very storied and very important up until their downfall. A tribe known as the Black Spiral Dancers, which, by the way, this has to be my favorite fucking logo for any of the tribes. This one's so fucking good. Hello.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I fucking
I
love
thought you
them.
were going to introduce them by their original name with that one,
I
but
I was about to get into them. They were once known as the White Howlers, up until they did what we like to call in the industry a fucky wucky. So the Black Spiral Dancers, their patron is currently Bat, but was Lion at one point, and we don't know what their renown is. So a long time ago, the White Howlers were once a very anti-worm faction. They were very much like the Red Fangs, isn't it? Or Red Talons. They're very much like the Red Talons, where they fucking hated the worm. The worm needed to fucking die. Fuck the worm. And they found a way to go attack the worm directly. Well, this resulted in their entire tribe being stuck in the worm for untold amounts of time. A large, dark maze of unknown chaos and corruption, resulting in them, when they finally got out, being a completely different people. The Black Spiral Dancers, who are under the patronage of Bat, which it is said that Bat, as a patron, is actually might be an original creation of the worm before its corruption. So we are talking about a pure being, not what the worm is now.
that are you going to talk about the story the Black Spiral Dancers tell themselves, or is that
Um, I'm gonna tell this version as of right now. I could
good?
talk about the other one, but I feel like that'd be a little long in my opinion.
Listen, I'm not going to go through the we don't have to go through the whole song and dance of it, it's just like for reference, they tell a kind of similar story about their downfall. They're just, um a bit there are a few details changed that if true make them pretty notably both stupid and the victims. Um
Yeah, it's a long plated issue, and I did do looking into it. But here's the other issue: is that with how they have it now, the Black Spiral Dancers may basically be on their last legs. They are
oh
almost most certainly extinct, almost.
that's kind of shit.
So they are no longer playable in 5th edition,
They
which they are
were they ever playable?
they were apparently at one point when they actually were originally a playable faction of the White Howlers, but then they got changed to the Black Spiral Dancers later on. Apparently like the 1st edition of Werewolf they were playable, and then after 2nd edition came out they were no longer.
Huh.
But due to them failing so badly and battling them out of the spiral, many of the members have kind of gone insane for the most part, and they're kind of fully worshipping the worm now. It's a very large issue. I will also note that the origin of the Black Spiral Dancers is not 100% confirmed, but is it thought that they hail from the Pictish lands. So they're Picts,
Ish.
probably. Um, it's mostly because it's thought that due to their heavy usage of spirals relates to that, but we'll see. There is also another thing that they might actually have a third patron, possibly, which is a Quipperwill. Which is a type of bird in reality, but this might actually be a Bane or a Fomori, and we're not 100% sure about it. So they
You're
might
gonna need to
actually.
you're gonna need to explain those terms. I don't think
I'm gonna explain them at the end.
okay, good.
They are something important that I am gonna have to explain because this is like the main fight of the Garu. Uh, Problem we don't really know, but we do know that the Black Spiral Lance is gonna do pretty good bird calls now with like all
Huh.
20 that are left.
Hmm.
But next up, we have what Riv hailed as probably one of his favorite factions, the
Now,
Bone Knives.
now, but before we move on, there is something I do want to know.
Please go ahead.
Very quickly, Old World of Darkness. The thing is White Howlers. They had their fall. The big thing is that at least in Old World of Darkness lore, the big thing is that any werewolf, any Garu could effectively, as they put it, dance the Black Spiral.
They
Most
still
wouldn't make
can.
Yeah, most would make that decision, but they were legitimately like a faction, not at the same size as the whole of all of the other tribes combined, but like a very distinctive like presence and very threatening when they were in town because they came at you in the same way you came at them in a pack of 4 to 5.
They still do. It's just like I said, they are very limited numbers now, and the other Garu tribes have basically made it to where trying to commit the rite of the Black Spiral is incredibly fucking difficult. Anytime, basically, they have their shamans constantly looking for it. So yeah, they're kind of limited numbers. The best guess is they are kind of spread out. They're still mostly in Europe and a little bit in America. But as far as you can be told, Black Spiral have basically been completely ish eliminated from Africa. But it can also be so that the Black Spiral is also kind of part of a different place now. They might actually have some members a part of our good friend Pentex now. And they're
Oh,
using
yeah,
their forms to try and bring the worm to the real world.
oh, yeah, old World of Darkness lore for that. Yeah,
Yeah.
there was legitimately a Black Spiral Dancer on on the, shareholders board. On the board
Yeah.
of directors. Like, unironically, there was an active Black Spiral Dancer on the board of directors, along with two other friends who can we talk about the directors board now?
Um, I think we can talk about the director's board, yeah.
Because
Since we're
we've
talking about
covered
Pentex here.
Pentex and yeah. The board of directors, has funny members like a Black Spiral Dancer, at least one member of the Sabbat on it. That
Yep.
was fun lore, and a member of the a technocracy faction known as the Syndicate, who we'll be covering in the Mage episode.
They're
But
very funny.
yeah, so it has a vampire, a werewolf, and a literal wizard all on the same. I mean, technically a wizard, all on the same team.
Tech witches, as you Guardians call them.
Yeah, except for like they'd be really
Yeah,
insulted about me calling him a wizard. Well, I mean, it depends on
they
his
don't.
actual rank in the syndicate
Yeah, it's a whole thing.
because okay, so something is there is no V5 mage lore yet, so I can just start spouting off old World of Darkness mage lore and it's gonna be fucking hilarious
I found that a little
because
strange considering how hasn't Mage been out for a hot minute now? Fifth edition
no,
thing?
it has not actually come out yet.
Oh.
The Ogre Popenag crew actually just played old mage.
Oh, that's what they're doing. Okay. Anyway, but as we were, so yes, Pentex has
I
got some
don't
interesting
think
things.
they
There
did.
is a
Hold
Black
on.
Spiral Dancer. But now we get to talk about your faction. We can talk about the Bonars,
I like the Bone
the
Nars.
boys. Right. So to make things honestly relatively simple, the Bonars. They are under the patronage of Rat, and they are known for their renown of honor, which I kind of laughed at when I originally saw that, but that's unrelated.
Yeah, as far as we know, mage isn't out yet. I
Uh,
think they're having trouble balancing it.
I'm not surprised.
No, no shit, it's unbalanceable.
It's physically impossible. But the Bonars are a kind of strange tribe as it sounds. They're essentially the outcasts, the unwanted, and the removables and undesirables of Garu society. They are those who see the Weaver as a terrible force because the Weaver causes all of our life's problems. And they used to share land in Africa with our good friend, the Silent Striders, and our other good friend, the Cult of Set, or the Ministry. And that resulted in some problems, which resulted in these Bonars being basically barely able to avoid the curse of the Silent Striders that the Ministry put upon them, which we'll get into when we talk about the Silent Striders, but the Bonars are known as basically the mangy hounds of society who are now known as freedom fighters, and will consistently be known as that with both in and out of Garu society. Problem, everything they try to do in their lives ends up fucking up somehow. And I don't mean that in the kindest terms either. I mean, for very bold instance, if I'm not mistaken, they supported the Russian Revolution in 5th edition, which resulted in them accidentally letting a Bruja clan vampire being installed as a very, very important source in the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a bit of a problem. And in modern Hunter, in modern Werewolf, Lord, I'm losing my mind. They are a part of the Final Knights, which the Final Knights are, well, the werewolf version of the Apocalypse, which ironically the game's named after because the Apocalypse is technically already happened for the Garu. This is the post-apocalypse. We're just in the final nights. They are basically just trying to stop the worm from entering, and ironically, the Bonars are probably one of the leading forces of that because they despise the worm and the Weaver. They just want the wild to exist because they are, like I said, the dregs of society. They blend in very well with lower class cities. They are often seen as vagrants, homeless spies. They work in soup kitchens very often. They provide for the people, but they're also known to be union organizers, busters of the corrupted, things along those lines. They're very interesting, and I like them like that. They also have what they like to call the Ban of Man, which is contradictory to what a lot of them do, but essentially it is the agreement across all Bonar factions and tribes that you cannot get associated essentially in the matters of man. Politics is off limits, saving them is off limits, so on and so forth. You can do small amounts of things like the soup kitchen thing I mentioned, but otherwise, not our problem. We have other things to deal with. We have other problems. Is there anything you'd like to add, Riv, about the Bonars?
Yeah, there's not it's not an absolute like massive departure from Old World of Darkness, but there are some notable differences. Like the big thing is as far as I knew, they never had that thing where they're not allowed to interact in human society. One of the big things is like they were did you talk about their guardian spirit yet? Because I don't think
Rat.
you did. Talk about that first
I did
before
talk
I
about their patron rat or
talk,
totem, depending on
yeah,
how you want to do it.
talk about rat first before I go on yapping, because that's I'm gonna be talking about that too.
Okay, so rat is kind of downplayed, ironically, in Bonar 5th edition. They're important, but essentially rat came to them after a very long streak of not having a patron because originally they didn't really have one. As I said, they were the outcasts, the unstrucken. And they were kind of just lumped together, and Rat was like, yeah, I like you guys, and basically picked them up in 5th edition. There's not really much more known about them besides their very small organizational structure as the Bone Strikers, which the elders basically talk to them, and tribe elders are normally addressed as mother and father and communicate directly to Rat the best they can. But outside of that, there's not really much. Rat isn't really addressed all too much within the new 5th edition. Though I will say the only major rule they do come up with is that don't kill vermin. Every totem does have a massive rule, and the one for them is do not kill vermin. Don't kill the rats. The rats are cool.
So
They also like ratkin.
yeah, Old World. Um, they had a thing where like their main like out of being a werewolf ability was that they can basically make food out of anything. Um, it always nutritious. Don't ask what's in it.
Shocker last.
It never tastes great, but like you can definitely go to school like eating something in a plastic bag called rat soup.
Is it gonna
Um,
taste good? Probably not.
it's gonna taste like battery acid. Let's be real.
Is it gonna taste good? Probably not. Is it gonna fill you up?
the
Yeah.
the big the big reason behind this is because they had the option of one of two like totem patrons. Their big ones were rat, of course, still, but their other one was cockroach.
Yes. Who I did note down as being one of
Well,
them, but technically, Cockroach is now a part of a different tribe, sort of.
yeah, in Old World of Darkness, due to some events that like will take a little bit longer to explain than is really justified, Cockroach was one of their big clan totems, like the bigger of the two mostly. It all depends on which bone now you're talking about, but Cockroach was in like by the end of Old World of Darkness, like heavily worm corrupted
Yes.
due to some events where Pentax does this thing where they try to like make custom changing breeds in order to throw at the werewolves for shits and giggles because
Yeah,
of the
they still do
worm.
that.
And they made a cockroach one, and the cockroach spirit felt really bad about the cockroach changing breed, and wanted to try and guide them. And because it kept interacting with horde creatures of the worm in an attempt to bring them to the light, it got corrupted.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a rough time all around.
Rip.
But moving on from our boys, the Bone Gnawers, who RIP their existences basically, we have what are now known as the Children of Gaia, who haven't changed their name. I just said that because they're actually pretty cool, to be honest. The Children of Gaia have their patron of Unicorn, and their renowned is wisdom. While I can say a lot about the Children of Gaia, we could be here literally all day about them because of how much information there is. The very simplistic term for them is they are the truest and most believers in Gaia. Gaia is their true mother, and anyone who isn't trying to essentially push forward the agenda of saving Gaia is kind of a waste of space in their eyes. But they're not going to do it violently. They believe, weirdly enough, in slight pacifism. But if a child of Gaia is to fight, good luck. They are very adept at what they do. They also were a part of a very interesting thing called the War of Rage, which they didn't really do too hot in, which was basically them trying to calm the other Garu, and it was a whole fucking thing. And this is like before the Impergium even, so there was a lot of issues. There were so many issues. Cause ironically, the Children of Gaia also just kind of fucked everything in their entire history. They basically almost got annihilated in Rome. They almost got annihilated during the Dark Ages and the Inquisition. When they came over to the Victorian era and talked with the pure tribes, um, they almost got fucked because the Fenris and the Fianna basically told them, "Ahaha, funny joke," and basically annihilated them. So yeah, they're not doing too hot. But their political structure is somewhat interesting, as they have currently three main leaders of their tribe. There is the voice of the goddess, which is normally a female, a arms of the goddess that is normally male, and the heart of the goddess, which could be anyone, but is normally a shaman or a spiritualist chosen by one of the spirits. There is technically also two other voices known as the Green Branch and the Cut Branch, which talk for the living and the dead, but that really just depends, and not every tribe has one. There are three cards they have, being the Sept of Healing, the Sept of the Western Eye, and the White Sea Sept, which mostly are in very weird locations, being Russia, Egypt, and San Francisco of all things. But it's just how kind of go. Their majority is about their religious culture, which is mostly seeing that the Weaver kind of bad, Worm very bad. We need to save the world. Oh no, Gaia's dying. And then they realize, oh no, Gaia might actually be dead. We might have fucked up. Oh no. Oh no. And it kind of just went from there. Riv, do you have anything to add? Because that's basically Child of Gaia 5th edition lore, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, they were like in old lore, they were definitely like the middle ground of everybody. They they really just wanted everyone to stop being like, idiots and just work together for once, please.
Mm,
They were also very much the ones that were
thank you for listening.
no um
Fuck you.
they were also, yeah, they were also somebody who actively, like accepted all of the what were they called again, the something,
The Methus.
the methods. They openly accepted them. They didn't ask any questions about it. They just took them in, no further details. That being said, um
Are my notes missing for the Fianna? I don't think they are.
as I had said, again, near the very end of the game, like, the setting, the old world of darkness setting, like some of them had started to say, listen guys, it's not the ideal solution, but like we're basically considered we'd be considered an endangered species. Look at the chart. We'd be considered endangered if and we're fighting a war here, right? Like our options are just hope the old ways are working. They weren't. They were actively producing less Garu than normal.
Yeah.
And or we could go with option C and start producing the ones that look kind of funky, but they're guaranteed to be werewolves, and we're running out of options, guys. We need to pick one.
Oh,
And then the setting ended. Oh,
I'm mad at myself.
why? What did you do?
I think I missed a tribe. Yes, I did. Which sadly is going to be our next tribe, so I will do my best here when talking about them, which they are currently now known as the Heart Wardens, and what they are now, correction, they're now currently known as the Heart Wardens. They used to be known as the Fiena. The Fiena are a interesting culture. Their current totem or patron is Stag, and their, as far as I'm aware, their renown is Wisdom. But I can be wrong about that. But nope, it's Wisdom. I double checked. We're good. My notes are a little scattered now because I apparently somehow missed these guys, even though I think they're really cool. They were born out of a passion created originally in tribal tale around, if I remember correctly, the Celtic regions of Europe. So, majority Ireland, Scotland, so on. And a lot of their people originally actually ended up becoming worm corrupted and ended up becoming the Firbolg, which, crazy. A lot of their lore comes from Fey mythology because the Morgan herself ended up actually getting involved with their existence, which is kind of terrifying, and ended up kind of curing slash cursing them, depending. A lot of the Celts tend to also end up being in the same kinfolk as the Fianna or the Heart Heralds. And they're also kind of known to come from France, which is kind of weird. But they follow Stag mainly because it is the original traditional hold of their people. And the Fae, aka the Morgan, who helped cure them, essentially said, follow the Stag and you'll be right. And she'll be right. Kind of thing. Let's see. Oh no, not the Fae. Yeah, the Fae always end badly. Don't worry, I'll be getting into the Changeling soon. Which is actually very interesting because the Fianna actually were involved with the White Howlers, the Pickish Garu, as I mentioned previously, who are now the Black Spiral Dancers. They, while the Fianna ruled Ireland, the White Howlers ruled Scotland. And while fighting the worm, the Howlers marched into the spiral labyrinth of the worm and didn't have a good time. The Fianna were very close to the White Howlers and mourning them for a very long time. And due to a lot of outward and inward tribal warfare between both actual Garu tribes and other tribes in general, the Silverfangs ended up ensuring that there be no cairn claimed in Ireland whatsoever, so that the technical now what was called Clan Fianna, which is now the Heart Wardens, could basically have the land to themselves. When the Fae left, they ended up having their power weaken a little bit, and some of them did leave to go to the new lands of the Pure tribes over in America. And no, they were the assholes who originally started the Pure tribes not liking people. They, as it stands, the Fianna or the Heart Wardens, they're not the greatest people. They kind of had a lot of problems, but they do very much dislike the worm. And they try their best, but not really much is going on. They try. Weirdly enough, though, they are also very good friends with the Get of Fenris, which I'll be getting into next. And they also share a ownership with what was the Untek tribe, which is now known as the Gale Stalkers. Or actually, no, correction, they're now known as the Ghost Council. Which, that's a whole fucking thing, which I will get into, like I said, because there is a very large portion of fucky wucky shit to that. They are also very interesting with how they raise their political culture and how they raise their children. The parents normally don't raise the Garu child. It is just an older Garu of other blood relation, normally like an uncle or an aunt, depending. And they teach the cub and new child everything to do. And anytime anyone is born of any of the different R specs, it'll be sorted out that way and be taught how the best is to do. And when I tell you something crazy, I tell you something crazy. There is a very famous hero in Celtic mythology who you all know me as Finn McCool. Fun fact, he was actually one of these. He was part of the Fianna. And he was also one to go bang the Fae in the Fae realms. But that's a whole thing in itself. Otherwise, they're very well known to be very hospitable, very gracious people, very brave, but they also have committed many atrocities in their time, while even being the nicest people among the Garu. So it really just depends. A very interesting fact about them, though, is that the Fianna actually are one of the only red-headed werewolves. They are completely covered head to toe in red fur. Is there anything you'd like to add, Riv?
Um, no, not really. Actually, I didn't do much research on this one.
Oh, fair enough. I will say they're very lore heavy, but they're also kind of not super important. If I'm going to be honest, they're basically only there to help out the White Howlers and basically fuck up. But as it stands, we're on to our next tribe, the Get of Fenris. After I take a sip of water,
Yeah,
I require the sippy.
man out here, therapy.
I require the sippy. Anyways, here we are, the Get of Fenris. Um, the Get of Fenris. They are fucking rough. Thank you, Reaps, for the spine crack. I could definitely use that right about now. I feel stiff. A little break from the werewolf talk. I am not ready for tomorrow.
What's
This
going
whole
on
reason
tomorrow?
I work a morning and an evening shift. So I'll be working about 10 hours. And then the day after I work a evening shift, then the day after that I work a morning shift, then I work another double the day after that. I'm not sleeping well the next couple days. Also, thank you, Reaps. Yep, that helps. Right, but the Get of Fenris, or as they're now more technically recently called, the Fenrites, or the Fenris, just in general, are technically a werewolf cult, kind of. It's got a whole thing about they're very mysticist, and they are majority of the Norwegian region. Try saying that 5 times fast.
Norwegian region, Norwegian region, Norwegian region,
Yeah,
Norwegian
pretty
region,
much.
Norwegian region. There you go.
Okay. But they are not a playable race. They're not something you can really play as, sadly. Though apparently they used to be able to in first edition, like majority of werewolf tribes, but they've kind of been taken
Oh,
away from that.
you used to be able to play with. You were able to play them in. I don't know about Chronicles of Darkness, but in all of the editions up until the newest one.
Oh, good to know. But their patron
Sorry, there's
is
a bug that I'm dealing with, so my mic's muted.
no, you're good. You have their patron is the ever benevolent wolf, and their renowned is glory. The thing about the Get of Fenris is they are the most violent tribe next to the Talons. For the pure reason is they are in a constant state of Halsklag, which essentially just makes them permanently angry because of their tense hatred of the worm. Which, if you really look at it from a gameplay and meta perspective, it may end up with them really going down the same route as the Black Spiral Dancers, but we'll see when it comes about. I'm not really too sure, and nor are the writers, to be honest. I wouldn't really be surprised. Like I said, they're not playable, and they do hail from the Norwegian zones, mostly as it stands, Norway, a little bit of Denmark, a little bit of Finland. They also very much fucking hate the Silverfang tribe, which we'll get into them again. Uh, Essentially, any chance there was a war in werewolf history or Garu history, they participated. They also essentially wiped out a good majority of things, but strangely, they were also very cordial with the two pure tribes that, again, we'll talk about in a minute. And they still have a feud with one of them due to modern issues, but the other one they do like. As of modern times, they have a very large Bane active and a bunch of other issues, but that's just kind of what they're trying to do the best of is get rid of Banes and Femoris. But they're kind of doing a crappy job at it for the most part because it's kind of hard to beat a thing that's coming up 1,000 times over. And a very large problem is a large portion of what was called the seventh generation of the Get was killed. So a lot of their older members are just gone, and they are now being ready for the Red Star, or as they call it, Ragnarok, the apocalypse. As for the organization, they commit moots, which, if you know what a moot is basically a large full moon party where they discuss politics while drinking, eating, and doing stuff as need be. And they have many camps, most of them consisting in the Norwegian countries. As for tribal culture, they have one main leader, though not normally one to really participate unless it is needed. As for religious readings and things, they mostly have skalds to tell stories, and they don't really have a written history, though they do have what is known as the Treit Edda, which consists of the Weaver, or Mother, the Wild, or correction, they have the Edda being the Weaver, Moider being the Wild, and Jormungandr being the Serpent, which is basically their entire religious structure. They also do have a bunch of glyphs used by the Garu nation, which they were basically the ones to invent the Garu language, strangely enough. We'll get more into that later, but they're very interesting. They're known as the White Wolves because of their basically Snow White's fur. Anything to add, Riv?
Yeah, listen, like there's there's a reason Shad doesn't have their old symbol up. Um,
There is a very big reason I don't have their old symbol up. We are not talking about why I don't have their old symbol up. That old symbol was rough,
yeah, but like they gave them a new symbol, right?
which is pretty okay.
And they still didn't make them playable.
Yep. That was kind of my issue. I do see the reason why they wouldn't, but also like, damn, just
No,
damn.
no, they like they should have just made them playable, you know?
Yeah. Right.
Actually, wait, I think that is their old symbol you have up
It might be.
because they didn't get a new one. That's yeah, it's the only one on the White Wolf wiki.
It's all I can find. So unless they have a different symbol that's associated with them, that this is the one I found. Which is just 2 claw marks, nothing more, nothing less. Anyway, moving on. We're now going to talk about the one you don't like and the one that I kind of like and find interesting.
Which
Which,
one?
the Glasswalkers.
Yeah, listen, they're very interesting, all right? Like they'd be very cool to play. I just like they're my least favorite because they're kind of like dicks. Oh, the Fina used to be called the Heart Wardens.
Yes, they did.
Okay, that's why I didn't recognize them.
Kind of. Okay, so modernistically, they're known as the Fina. They used to be known as the Heart Wardens, but also the way 5th edition tells it, it used to be the other way around, where they used to be known as the Fina and are now the Heart Wardens, but I don't know, man. There's a lot of conflicting sources for Werewolf, and it's kind of annoying.
It's because like White Wolf Wiki contains both the modern lore and old world lore.
Yeah. I also used the actual Paradox wiki, which was kind of helping out, but eh. Anyway, as it stands, welcome to the Glasswalkers, whose patrons are Spider and Cockroach, depending on who you ask, and they're renowned as wisdom. In their earlier histories, during the time of the apes, and during like early tribes, they were known as the Warden of Apes, or the Wardens of Men, depending, during the Dark Ages. They normally originally were helping out with a lot of other things. They also helped fully adapt during the time of Rome and Carthage. They were actually defenders of that time and fought against many others while also competing against both the Silverfangs and different vampires at the time, which was a very large problem. which resulted in them moving over to Italy, and that also became a very large problem. And a splinter faction of them also split off and went to China, which that we'll talk about in a bit. During the Dark Ages, they became the Warders of Men, which they used a lot of things and actually were part of the Inquisition, strangely enough, which was very interesting to learn about because they would end up killing other Garu pretty frequently. And during the Renaissance, they were just kind of chill. They basically just helped stop the Triad the best they could while also basically modeling the Greek gods as after their own souls, which was a whole fucking thing. And then finally, they were known as the Iron Riders during the Age of the Victorian. They did help find common ground for all the Garu nation between the native tribes of the Pure tribes and help destroy any banes created at the time, but they weren't really involved much more than that. After the modern age hit, which normally Werewolf is considered to be 1895, that tends to be where the modern era begins, around like the early like 1900 or late 1900s, give or take. They changed their names to the Glasswalkers after basically finding themselves in the father city of London and dedicating themselves to a more urban spirit known of Arcana or Incarna, and basically set themselves to aid against the worm while living amongst the people. They were also known to be very, very heavily a part of the Second World War, and also may have done something a little fucked up. They also
Which time?
um this time the cyber dogs. They took lupus and cybernetically enhanced them against their will,
Yep.
at least in the modern times.
I don't think they did that in the previous lore, but I do remember hearing about that.
It is well
So they
noted
may
that the
actually have.
I'll say it is well noted that the Glasswalkers are split up into a couple different factions within themselves. There are three major ones that I can talk about. The corporate Glasswalkers, the normal modern Glasswalkers, and the deep Glasswalkers. The corporate Glasswalkers are also referred to as corporate wolves, which they end up getting a part of mega corporations and things and getting high power and trying to keep the Pentex Corporation in check as well as the worm. They're also a part of the modern crime and mafia portions. And they can also just be technically a part of random just occurrences alongside the modern version. The modern Glasswalkers tend to be a part of farmers, and they tend to create enclaves in cities to help nurture the Weaver, as well as I stated, just do random little things. Create technology and things like that. Then there are the two what can be referred to as the Deep Glasswalkers, which are the Dies Ultima and the Umbral Pilots. The Dies Ultima are, well, they join Doomsday cults. And they're also parts of mercenary units that are ready for the apocalypse, exploring urban trackware. And they even allow just different kinfolk to join their rank, as well as even maybe humans, though it's unknown. And then lastly are the Umbral Pilots, who are insane enough to deep dive into the dark and deep Umbra. So they're going to the territory of the Wraiths, which we'll talk about a different time. And they mostly do it for science. It's kind of strange, but they are known for doing absolute inhumane abominations such as the cyber dogs I mentioned and using people for biological warfare essentially. So oops, I guess. As of tribal composition, they don't really have a direct leader. They're more of a social source where they just kind of gather up in corporate buildings and talk. But their major carns tend to be in Hong Kong, Russia, and Egypt, and most metropolitan areas. And they also don't really work off the litanies. They have their own special organization called the Tribe Book, which is a complete and total record of their history written down, along with apparently a copy of the Goodfellas. But I think that's supposed to be a joke upon the author's writing. But we'll see how it goes, especially since a lot of the Glasswalkers are Italian. We'll see how it goes. But they also strangely enough, are very big heralds of Memorial Day. They really like Memorial Day.
Hmm.
Anything to add to that, Riff?
Yeah. At least in V5, that was more or less it's more or less basically the same. It's not exactly the same, but it's very at least very similar. Um so some fighting werewolves I just looked at chat.
I like the pretty cool.
Yeah. But like the big thing is they were at least very heavily focused on yeah, lore feels it kind
It
of
is a
does.
flashbang.
Yeah, their old lore at least was very much a lot of how do I put it? They were primarily like either the ones who were actively infiltrating companies or hacker groups who were actively trying to, hack Pentex shell companies.
Kind of. They still do. It depends on what part of the faction you're a part of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of them do it a little more subtly. Others do it more white hat, black hat,
Yeah.
anonymous hacker.
The other things are, the Weaver really likes them like a lot. And
Yes,
something that will come up later, since we will be talking about like classic mage, the internet was just a had its because of how werewolf works and how the setting worked, the internet got its own spirit realm.
it did.
So there were internet spirits, and it was kind of psychotic, and also I love it so much
It is.
because both glasswalkers especially, and werewolves in general, and mages could unironically just phase shift into the literal internet bottom text.
Yes, they can. Glasswalkers, as far as I looked into, are very well known for doing that, actually.
Yes.
Especially, also another tribe, as far as I'm aware, but not as often. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Black Spirals are also kind of known for doing it occasionally. But the major one are actually the Shadow Lords of fucking apparently. Which we'll get into them in a minute, though I'd have to double check on that. I think it was the Shadow Lords. Not the internet spirit of Clippy. Oh god. No. Not Clippy, anything but fucking Clippy.
Yo, Bonzi Buddy has to be a worm bane. I'm not gonna lie.
Bonzi Buddy is a wormbane. There is no question about that. That thing is cursed. I will accept a lot of things as fact, but Bonzi Buddy's fucking scary, man.
Yeah, something I don't know if you covered or not. Pentax does this thing where they use their shell companies to make products like phones and
Yes.
microwaves and clothes and shit. And they actively insert very small worm banes into them so that it will
Yes.
slowly and unnoticeably corrupt people over time.
I was going to talk about that during the Bane and Fomori section.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I
Sorry,
say, yeah,
sorry about
you're all
that.
good. Yeah, don't worry. I was gonna get to the joke I consistently keep making of they're putting demons in our burgers to make us beat our wives.
Yeah, no, it's very much. Do you know that video of like the guy sticking his fucking Nokia in his microwave, and like
Yeah,
it looks like a fucking like screaming head is coming out of it?
yeah,
Yeah, that's literally
that's
just
it.
microwaving. That's microwaving a worm bane to MP4.
Yeah, pretty much. But as it stands, next up is the Red Talons, which I'm actually kind of excited to talk about these guys because these are incredibly important
Yes, the
and
terrorists.
pretty yeah, pretty much the T word. These
Wait,
are
wait. Okay, hold on. I'm so confused about what you can fucking say on this platform
I
because
don't
sometimes
know,
you hear
man.
people.
I just kind of say willy nilly, but we try to. Are they the edgy boys? I wouldn't call them the edgy boys. I call
No,
them
no,
more
no,
psychopathic murderers.
no, no. The edgy boys are the shadow lords. Bottom
True.
text.
I would say, kind of the Silent Striders too, but it depends. But not really. Anyways, yeah, no, it's more Shadowless. These guys are more murder hobos. Their patron is Griffin, and their renown is honor. Weirdly enough, the Red Talons see the worm as the major problem in life, but the Weaver is the worst problem to ever exist because it caused all this garbage. They they see it as all living things are causing problems, so all living things kind of need to shut the fuck up and die. And the only things that really matter to them are violence, power, and gain, essentially. Talking is fucking stupid, and they are a majority faction of the Wolfborn Garu, So they start off in lupus form and turn forward. The problem is that they know better. They know that if, for example, bombing a shipyard is kind of a small thing, or maybe blowing up the Google headquarters is gonna do a big problem. But they don't really care. They're more for they just want to deal as much damage as a quick person as possible, even if it's superficial damage. And their big thing is they see all humans as fucking living garbage and they should be eradicated, which is why they were the main proponent of our big issue from earlier, the Primori. So, yeah, they're not really nice guys, to say the minimum. The Impergium was kind of the big thing for them. And the problem is they don't have a written history or even an oral history, really. Like, the most oral history they have is we exist and sad stuff happened, but we also really cool. And scary enough, they're actually the first tribe to produce Methus. So apparently, they're the only time to. They were the first to basically have a normal Lupin Garu and a Humoid Garu to, go cuckoo banana. And it didn't go well. And woof. Woof. They basically took villages over and began to murder Duodrukari and murder fuck them to death. It was not a fun time. And until finally the Silverfangs basically were like, hey guys, chill the fuck out. And then the War of Rage fucking happened because they didn't give a shit. A lot of things are also important in Garu society, and most of that revolves around the prophecies of Shadow and the Songs of Shadow, which basically predated the fall of Constantinople, and they suffered from a plague that basically flayed their skin off their bodies. Yeah, the Red Talons didn't have a very good time. Um, it's a very big issue. They also see a problem with the Bunyip, which are a unaligned, essentially other shifter species. They're not exactly like they're Garu, but they're pacifist Garu. So I don't really like them all too much. I won't be getting into them currently because they're more of a sub faction. But yeah, big issue. And they also don't get along with the pure tribes. Basically, nobody gets along with these guys. They all fucking hate each other, and they're all known to do the most extremist actions possible. They always really see the wild as good, and even that's kind of loose. Anything you'd like to add, Riv?
Yeah, so in classic World of Darkness and classic World of the Apocalypse, the Red Talons were very much a particular way all the time. They actively would not accept anyone who was, human of human birth. They were wolf only birth.
Mm-hmm.
They actively killed humans. They actively, did terroristy things. They barely played well with the other wielding Gaia aligned factions. They just sort of they
Honestly, it's
were
pretty
kind
much the
of the
same.
they were one of the bad guys you just sort of had to live with because they were on your team and getting rid of them wasn't really a feasible option.
Honestly, it's pretty much the same in fifth edition. They are basically just tolerated, not really seen as
With
good.
with the exception of, again, they absolutely despised humans. They hate fucking
Oh,
humans.
they still do. Don't get me wrong. They will still automatically kill a human on sight. They just use them as breeding cattle, basically.
They didn't even do that in Old Lore. They
Yeah.
just killed them. They just killed them, period.
Yeah, not fun time. Right, but onwards and nextwards, we have the Shadow Lords, who are edgy as fuck, to be honest. They are of the patron of Grandfather Thunder and are of the renown of glory. These are your spies, your assassins. These are your edgy motherfuckers that are your typical D&D rogue. They are underhanded and they see fighting as fucking useless unless it gains them power and they can get the upper hand easily.
Also, welcome back from the ad break.
Yeah, welcome back from the They understand that symbolic wins are kind of a waste, and that you need true victory to really attain anything. Wasting resources isn't helping the fight, it is just literally a waste of resources. They see politics and winning at politics to be the truest form of winning. If you can take over a country and do it swiftly, or take over a part of a Garu tribe, you win. Automatic. End of sentence. You are doing really well. They also don't see any pride in being angry, so they're very calm and quiet, but they still have the beast inside of them. Mind you, they're also very heavily aligned with the Weaver. They understand that its power is incredibly important and that they work with it very heavily. They also really aren't liked and are fucking hated by basically everybody else because they're seen as sneaky, underhanded little bitches. So that's the whole thing. And as for Grandfather Thunder, their patron, it does allow them slight abilities of storm and lightning, but outside of that, there's not a whole lot. They also very much dislike Christianity. Um, Actually, to be honest, they don't really like majority of religions, as they're actually originally from the steppes of Eurasia. So a lot of their religious views are persecuted heavily. So it's kind of a bad mess. Though they did support the original. Excuse me, a yawn came over me. Ooh. Though they did support the Silverfangs in being raised up to leaders. They also extremely hate vampires, like most Garu, and actually are very well known to, weirdly enough, work alongside vampires, at least until they can get a good murdering upon them. And as for that, along with they did also help fight the Baba Yaga and her armies, and two of their Karns fell, but they were able to finally help defeat Baba Yaga. And as for the final knights, which is as of current,
I'm sorry. Did you just mention Hermes?
no,
Oh, I'm sorry. I must have misheard that. That's my bad.
I said Karns and her armies.
Army. Yeah, that's my bad.
You're good. As of right now, they still are heavily in the Balkan region, taking care of Wormspawn and Banes, and are kind of mostly dealing with Yugoslavia as an existence. But they also did help the Americans in the Amazon War as of right now. As an organization, they are mainly led by alphas. Again, Neon took me over. They're mainly led by alphas, which they work like normal wolf pack, even though that's not a real thing, but whatever. And normally they are to gain their followers with the powers of feelings of pride, affection, endurance, all that type of stuff. And also they do this because they realize that, slaves are easier to control. So, yeah. And interestingly enough, the Shadow Lords are actually maybe the distant cousins of the Haken, which are the Hengyokai that are the most similar to normalized werewolves in Asia. Though we will get into them later, the Haken are very well known for following the Koda Bushido. So we'll see how that goes. But their tribal culture is very much emphasizing a power of bravery and brains over brawn. And as for their religious culture, it's pretty much they will sacrifice themselves for Gaia, but only if it actually makes the greater goal go forward. Anything else is kind of useless, to be honest. And they see it as kind of stupid. Anyways, anything to add on the Shadow Lords?
I remember from Old World of Darkness, they were Russian and they fought Baba Yaga, and that's honestly, and that they were pretty elitist, but otherwise that like woo, that's all I learned about them because I was not interested. No offense, Shadow Lord. No offense, Shadow
I'm
Lord
gonna be
fans.
real. That's pretty much the whole thing.
You're great. Shit, there is something I did.
What?
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't have anything extra to say. Yeah, Slav werewolves. Yeah.
Pretty
Um,
much.
right. Yeah, you mentioned the Amazon War, which is something entirely like to itself.
It is. It was just a slight mention because they're basically it was just like a major mention of the Amazon war being a very large thing they're doing in modern time. I just figured it'd be nice to mention. Give people
Oh
little
yeah, right.
breadcrumbs.
Kinfolk, very important werewolf society. Very important people. Very important
Yeah.
normal, almost normal humans.
Yes.
Actually, fun fact, while we're mentioning it, I don't know if we're ever going to mention them again. Are we going to mention them again?
Kinfolk?
Yeah.
We already kind of mentioned them earlier, but we can mention them now if you'd like.
There's just one thing I want to say about them. Fun fact, since kinfolk are not werewolves, they actually I'm going to mention the like the weird interactions between werewolves and vampires, and I don't mean like the you need to drink water now, by the way.
Yep, I got the water.
Are we going to mention the like the specific interactions between the certain supernatural elements of werewolves and vampires?
We will after about the tribes and before I get to the Banes.
Okay. Are we going to talk about the are we going to talk about their interaction with mages?
A little bit, not too much, because I was figuring we'd save the mage stuff for the mage episode mainly. I only
Honest,
want to cover like a small amount.
okay, I'll wait till we're covering it section bits. Keep going.
Yeah, all good. All right, but next up is a tribe that I honestly had some pretty big information on and I found very interesting. The Silent Striders. They are one of the other tribes that were alongside the Children of Gaia, and they were one of the first ones to actually protest against the Impergium. But they were also in the same homeland as the followers of Set, also known as the Ministry, which led to issues. But the Silent Striders have their patron of Owl, and their renowned is wisdom. They are the tribe of knowledge. If there is something that could be known, they will know it. Even if it's not accessible at the time, they will find a way to access it. They are probably one of the best diplomats in all of Gadu society, and will pick up on customs and rituals pretty easily. So if you sit them down and like they observe, they will pick it up instantly, essentially, or at least like after like the first or second time. Problem is, they also will spread these customs and rituals very heavily, and that kind of gets the whole tourist vibe from them, which is not very well looked upon a lot of the time. And they're also known for kind of causing change and issues in certain regions without picking up after themselves. So they'll basically do a cultural revolution somewhere and then leave the people to pick up the mess, which not very helpful. Kind of is how it goes. But they do have one very large caveat with them. They are a cursed tribe. They have a death curse set upon them by our good friend Set, who is why is the name escaping me? I was going to say Methuselah, but that's not right. Antediluvian, yes.
Antediluvian.
The
Yeah.
Antediluvian of the followers of Set and the ministry. Which the death curse is still active, and their patron owl guides them to maybe find a cure one day. It's pretty doubtful. As of what they've been doing throughout history, most of their stuff tends to be against vampires. They're very vampire anti, and they also worship under the idea that the Weaver is also like the best thing to ever happen. They also were very heavily in the Dark Ages among the Caliphates and a large portion of Asia, and they are trusted among the Asian kinfolk and shifters, as they are accepted in the Beast Courts, unlike other Garu. There is also other problems of them being very anti-mage. They don't like mages very much due to a very large issue with them being poisoned fucking constantly and flayed and killed by mages. But that's a whole nother story for when we get to mage. I will say, the Silent Striders were aware of the Pure Ones a very long time before the European Garu had set, and many of the Silent Striders only really went to America out of curiosity and to maybe help them not get completely fucked. But it didn't really go too well, as in modern times they're still trying to amend for their past transgressions. As of modern times, well, there's kind of wandering around and being radicalized groups in the Middle East. That is the majority of what they're doing. And they're also against the Black Tooth and the Endless Storm, which will be probably mentioned if we ever get delve deeper. They also do have moots as well, And they are the holders of the smallest amount of Karens, being only 5. Other tribe, I did mention one earlier of the Glasswalkers, which had 3, but those are a more recent tribe for the most part. And the Striders have been kind of fucked over a lot, and a lot of their ones have been destroyed, so it's a whole mess. As for camps, they do have 2, and neither of them are very well liked at all. But to be fair, they're kind of secrety twitchy, so it's just kind of how it be. But more on as we go. There is also the matter of their political culture, which they get along with just about everybody. Not everybody likes them, but they get along with everybody. And yeah, that's basically the Silent Striders. Anything you'd like to add? Riv?
Oh, no, I don't have anything to add now.
Okay. Want to make
No,
sure.
just like you mentioned the stuff with Set, which I didn't mention last time. I guess we could technically mention the stuff with Osiris, but that's also old World of Darkness lore, and I don't want to talk about Mummy yet.
I was going to say, we're going to be talking about Money later, so we'll
Much,
get to it.
much, 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 much later, hopefully.
I mean, to be fair, it's Werewolf, then Mage, then I'll be doing Wraith, and then you either can do Hunter or Mummy.
I'll probably do Hunter, since truth be told, Mummy is like one of the last games they released.
I was going to say, if it's best if we cover the last ones, so it'll be Mummy then Demon.
Yeah.
But
that being said, Demon had 12 fucking books released in the last like 2 years of fucking World of Darkness's life. That's not a joke. They had 12 books released in the final like 2 years of that system's lifespan.
Okay, then damn. Right, but as it were, okay, wow, the Mummy is the dirty sock nobody wants to see. Pretty much, yeah. It's because you can only play as a good guy. You have to be morally a good guy.
The issue with Mummy, right, it isn't just have to be a good guy, right? It comes with a ton of strings attached, and you are a good guy, right? Like you are just like it's not a bad thing to be a good person, like in World of Darkness, right? Like a lot of the werewolves are good guys. At the very least, they're definitely the good guys of a sort. Mages definitely see them. The mages and the technocrats both see themselves as the good guys. They're doing a moral good. The salubri of the vampire clan are believe themselves to be doing the good thing, and it's not necessarily a bad thing to play that. It's just Mummy has a lot of lore ties. It just doesn't have a lot of depth as a faction.
Fair. Right. But if we're good,
I mean, it has depth, right? It's just it feels like you just are the good guys. You don't have like you're not surrounded. You're not like there aren't a bunch of bad guys. You're not fighting like in Werewolf. You're raging against the dying of the light. It's just you're just like you're basically running in as like in the last minute trying to save the world, whereas everyone else has some sort of complication going on.
yeah, fair enough. Honestly, I don't have much of an opinion because I don't really know much about Mummy, which is why we're going to be covering it. But as it stands, next up we're going to be covering the Silver Fangs. These are the air quote alpha tribe of the Garu Nation, and their totem slash patron is Falcon, as well as their honor being their renown being honor. Which well, the Silver Fangs are your leaders, rulers, diplomats of the Garu Nation, and they are very heavily built into the aristocracy of just the real world. They're mostly descended from kings, queens, dukes, counts, things like that. And a lot of the Silver Fangs are also hailed pretty heavily by the spirits of the world. If there's a contract a spirit had held with a Silver Fang or any of the Garu Nation, they will see the Silver Fangs first and be like, ah, a Silver Fang. You are to be trusted. They are very well known for this. A good majority of the Silver Fangs are kind of not in a good spot. A lot of the other tribes have basically said, fuck you. You caused the Garu Nation to fail and Gaia to die. You failed at your fucking job. Great job, dipshit. And, well, Yeah, it kind of resulted in a majority of the elders basically being stuck up and telling everyone else they can get off their high horse, and
Yeah.
younger Silverfang Garu to basically be like, "Oh, we're so sorry. I'll do whatever it needs to suck up and be like and fit into my position. I serve thee." And it's just not doing very well and good. Um, I'll say the major problem with the Silverfangs is that they're also not very smart. And I mean that less in the sense of they're like intelligence smart, more wisdom smart, because they decided to go fight vampires and mages anytime it's possible because of their ideas of honor. And it's gotten them in very deep shit many a time, not limited to fighting just about every terrible thing possible. They also aren't the biggest fan of the Weaver either, but they believe it is important to exist. They were also the classic colonials when it came to the Pure Lands and fucked them over pretty hard. It's not very good. In the modern age, they also had to deal with Baba Yaga and many other vampires, of which caused them many issues. They're not doing too hot at all. To be honest, if you want me to be honest, the Silver Fangs are kind of little baby bitches. Yeah, they're not great, to be honest. They only have three main Karns, being the Aral Sea Karn, the Sept of the Crescent Moon, and the Sept of the Midnight Sun. But they do have many, many tribal houses and lodges, but many of them have also been lost. I will say the Silver Fangs at least kind of look cool, because they're very well known for carrying around swords of all things. So, there's that. Otherwise, yeah, they're basically just diplomats, but they're the Shadow Lords, but not edgy and actually aristocratic. That's the best way I can give it to you. Riv, is there anything you would like to go over?
I sent you my reaction.
What did you send?
Terrible job, super shit.
Yeah, that would do it. That's pretty much the Silver Fangs in a nutshell. Yeah. All right, next up we have the Stargazers. These are, I'm gonna be honest, you can't really describe the Stargazers very well. They do and don't have a patron. As of their old lore, they have the patron of Chimera. As of their new lore, their patron is currently unknown. Their renowned is wisdom, and the Stargazers are seen as the mages of the Garu society. They are your magic guys. They see everything as it can be solved by spirit magic, or it can be solved by just magic, period. But they also see every problem made in existence as a system issue. They see things as systematic. Yet, so they're very loners and they're very heavily divided against the Garu Nation as they are trying to break down the systems that are currently causing the Garu Nation to deal issues. The interesting part is that they're all very well taught together about Garu magic, and there's a lot that can be taught to each other and from each other about it. For instance, there is a lot of werewolf rituals that go deep into lore that they are very well known for having, that no other tribe may have. It is also thought that somehow the Stargazers are all in a very deep state of Harano, which from earlier is werewolf depression, basically, and temperance. And they don't really know why, and nobody else really knows why, but they are. Most likely it's because they're a lot more passive than other people, but they also don't really care about other Garu as much as other Garu care about each other. Like, at least, like, other Garu will hate other tribes, but they don't. They don't like or hate any of them. They just don't care about them because they're not the problem. They only really care about the world that's going to come after this one, and they are preparing for that constantly. And they are creating methods to allow for their tribe as a whole to pass on to the next world in less of a, oh, we're all going to die, let's get ready for the afterlife type of thing, and more of, let's get ready for the new earth that's going to become existent here soon, because everything's cyclical. As it is said, they may not have a patron at all in the new lore, but their old lore, it was Chimera, which helped them essentially see through the veil and disguise themselves pretty easily. And sadly, they are a shrinking tribe in both numbers and power due to the worm destroying their homelands. And it is thought that many stargazers are actually corrupted by the worm. Originally, the stargazers did descend by a very important character known as Kital Starcatcher, a sage from the eastern portions of the world, but not much is known about them, so I won't really address them too much here. They're originally said to come from India and specifically the Himalayas, but after the War of Rage and Shame, they kind of started spreading out a little more. They mostly hunt after worm beasts and don't really get involved too heavily in politics or the world, more or less just doing things that actually save things. During the Pure Lands, very few Stargazers went, and basically all the Pure tribes liked them because they didn't decide to fuck around and do stupid shit. And interesting enough, in modern times, they're actually very well allied with the Han Yokai. And they were promised to help, and the Han Yokai actually helped and promised the Stargazers to help regain control of their ancestral homelands over in the east. And to the shock of the other tribes, they just withdrew and joined the Asian beast courts basically to help fight the worm. They do some interesting camps, which are so long in name, I'm not even gonna bother pronouncing them basically. And they're all heavily Asian, so help me now. And they're also less battle minded, more wisdom, as I mentioned before. And any of the actual warriors in the Stargazers tribe are called basically the nomad are basically just nomadic Garu that kind of aren't super affiliated. They do also accept more help from the Silent Striders than anybody else, but not as much as you'd like to think. As for religious things, they are taught a special martial art called Kendo, which basically focuses their mind, magic, and body to all act as one super being. And they're also very heavy into Buddhism, which is very interesting. I do like that aspect a lot. And besides that, they are known to describe the triad as the force of passion, reality, and darkness. But they all know that all three balances need to be existent. Is there anything you would like to add, Rip, to the Stargazers?
Oh no, I remember them existing,
Yeah.
and I remember them being like magic-y from Old World of Darkness, but like I remember that like I didn't look into a whole lot of Werewolf because there's a lot of things to look into in World of Darkness, and I just sort of passed Werewolf over, not because it was uncool, but because I had other interests that needed to be satisfied, like
Fair
the
enough.
FBI.
We're not
By
going
the
to
way,
address that.
no, in the Hunter. By the way, look forward to Hunter. Like 3 episodes from now, when I am going to be discussing FBI in the Satanic Pyramid of Power in Hunter. Thank you.
I'm not really surprised by that whatsoever. Right,
We'll also be
so.
covering the Catholic Society of Leopold, but that's because Hunter
Yeah.
doesn't have a whole lot to talk about,
Well.
and because honestly, the Society of Leopold's really cool.
Yeah, they're addressed a little bit in Vampire Bloodlines, so yeah. Anyway,
Like their bloodlines are underfunded. The fuck.
I mean, yeah, they're in Bloodlines though.
Yeah, they're in there. They're just like there is a
Not really looked
huge
upon.
point in time. Well, not discussion right now. Not discussion right now. Continue.
Yeah, I'll say we're moving on. Anyways, so next up we have the Gale Stalkers. Their patron is the
Rap, tap, tap.
I hate you so much, aggro.
What's rap tap tap?
It's the man of the wall from Warframe, whispering rap tap tap in my eardrums. Aggro, you are so lucky you're cute, otherwise I'd be literally throwing you through a wall right now. Ah, right. The Gale Stalkers. Their patron is the North Wind, and their renown is known as Honor. But they are a interesting tribe because they're actually one of the pure tribes that I've been mentioning. They've been renamed from their original version, which I will get into after I kind of address
Wait,
the
wait,
newer version of stuff.
wait. Weren't they the Wendigo?
Yes, they were.
Okay.
Right. But the Gale Stalkers are now what? How do I even get into this properly? They are essentially what the Garu would be if shit didn't hit the fan and if they actually listened to Gaia and basically led the charge, which they kind of are still doing now. Anytime there is an enemy of the Garu in a area that the Gale Stalkers are in, they're not going to last the night. They're going to be murdered so hard it's not even funny. Any being that betrays Garu is accepted as Banes, other Garu, vampires, mages, hunters, doesn't matter. If you have pissed off the Garu, you are a part of this. They have zero fucking interest in politics. But if a strong political leader tells them, hey, there's a really good hunt over here if you listen to what I say, they're willing to listen. And they will do what's need be. They are also known to not really be very big fans of a lot of things. Originally, they were chosen by Sasquatch, which is a very interesting point, as now they are by the North Wind. And then later on, after basically dealing with all the really dumb shit that the Eastern and the European Gadu committed, after the death of the Croatians, the tribe was basically sent to kind of a bit of a hell state, and where they had to basically get rid of a bunch of worm creatures, and were calling the European Gadu the Worm Bringers. It was a very rough time. And so on and so forth. They are very few in number, very closely knit, and mostly made of the native societies of the Americas, both North and South, but mainly North. And a lot of their spiritual practices don't really come from the eastern part, but come more from native practices, which honestly, a lot of interesting stuff there. There also are technically a part of another tribe I'm going to talk about, being of the other pure tribes. We'll get to them in a second, as we do have to talk about the previous version of the Gale Stalkers, the Wendigos. Originally, their patron was Wendigo, and I'm gonna be real, they're not much that different. They were violent hunters, all the same, and fucking hated the European Garu for ruining what was essentially a pure state. Because they believed that Gaia was the land itself, and the European Garu didn't really agree with that all too much, and decided to fuck things over, as, you know, colonizers do to the West. But, unless you have any notes, Riv, about the good old Gale Stalkers, I think we can move on.
Not about them in particular, but yeah, something to remember is in vintage World of Darkness. The werewolf tribes were very much like based upon like you could canonically you could and mechanically you could only pick ones that were actually active in the region you want to start in. So you couldn't play like you couldn't reasonably play like an Italian Get of Fenris. They just weren't in that region. It wouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
The only ones that were exceptions to that rule were the Bone Gnars, because they
They're
accept all
everywhere.
comers, and the Children of Gaia, because they accept all comers.
Yep.
That's with a U, by the way.
Yep. So, shut up.
You just fucking got it. You just fucking got it. You just got it.
You're banned from the podcast. I'm getting a new fucking co-host.
Oh no, I'm so threatened.
Anyway, as it can be stand, next up is the Ghost Council. Their patron, huh? Bro.
Reaper. Thank you, Reaper.
Anyway, next is the Ghost Council. Their patron is the Horned Serpent, and they're renowned as Wisdom. The entirety of the Ghost Council is essentially mystics and shamans who are unafraid to delve into the forbidden and the unreal magic. Anything that can exist will exist, and anything that will exist can be in their hands. They are here for all things that are terrifying and terrible, and they actually are heavily opposed to the Children of Gaia. A lot of the tribes are wisdom, yeah, I don't know why. A lot of them are, it's a very heavy split between honor and glory, and then wisdom is just majority. But they are very well known to oppose the Children of Gaia of all things, because the Children of Gaia are like, oh, not all causes need to happen. We can be pacifist, and then the Ghost Council will make a nuke and use it. They don't care how a tool is used, so long as it's used to kill the worm. And they will do anything by any means. And I do not joke that at all. They have been well known to let gangrels of the clan gangrel to join their cause, so long as they, join the cause. And they're
Oh,
also very well known to let other shifters join them, so long as they know the cause.
oh, that is one thing I didn't cover when I was talking about Gangrel. Well, again, they do firmly believe that the best way to deal with a werewolf is to avoid them. In a lot of, especially like national parks and forests, Gangrel and werewolves usually just have territory and keep to it. It's almost always better that they just let the other one exist, because the gangrel in the wild usually feed off are usually considered what were considered farmers. They usually drink animal blood instead of human blood.
Yep.
And the werewolves just it's vampires are far outclassed by a werewolf's war form. You
Yes.
should not, under in any circumstance, underestimate any like a vampire for no reason. They are crafty, they're just as
Honestly,
crafty as you. They will fuck you up if you give them the
it
chance.
is a very well noted thing that I should talk about in the forums part. Werewolves are not to be underestimated, neither are vampires. In a 1v1, in a pure 1v1, it is a total 50-50 depending on who wins, in my
It might
opinion.
No, not even. It depends. If
It
the
depends on
vampire,
what vampire and what
well,
werewolf.
not even then. If the werewolf is in its humanoid form, if the werewolf does not change shape soon, they're fucked,
Kairos.
guaranteed. If they do not change to Keranos soon, they are fucked, guaranteed. If they're in their Keranos form already, the unless the werewolf is unless the vampire is well prepared or very old and experienced, they're fucked, guaranteed.
Pretty much. Any new bloods are done for.
Yeah, any neophytes or any neophytes or neonates and
Childhood.
fledglings are absolutely done for.
Yeah.
Um,
But continuing as is with the Ghost Council, they, as I said, they're willing to take even gangrels and other shifters into their ranks, but that is just rumor. It is just a rumor, at least to the other people of the Garu Nation, or what was the Garu Nation. But it's probably more fact than fiction, depending. So it's really gonna matter. And thank you for the follow, Bandy Bow. Welcome to hell. You're now enlisted forever. But as it stands, their patron is the Horned Serpent. The Horned Serpent's incredibly pragmatic and tends to be very forward with what it wants. It wants knowledge, may it be forbidden or well known. Does not matter to it, so long as it can get its hands on it. I will make note that the Ghost Council was once known as a different name of the tribe of the Unteka. The Unteka, being their previous version, is, well, yeah, it's a whole thing. They were originally a native tribe, just as the brain cells, as the Gale Walkers were, but they were kind of changed as their old one was, because originally their totem was Unteka, which in itself was essentially a horned serpent, pre-horned serpent, and it was a water spirit. So there's that. But as of now, they're mostly known as a very feared, very mysterious shaman tribe, hailing from just about every part of the Americas, and they don't really get along with most people. They don't really get along with majority of the normal Garu nation, and they very heavily disdain the worm bringers for bringing the worm taint. As of now, though, they haven't really done a ton, but they were a part of the group that first help release slaves during the mass part of African slavery and Polynesian slavery. And a lot of those people have also intermixed and mingled into the Unteka tribe. Or well, as stated now, the Ghost Council. But it'll be seen. In 2002, it was really the last time anybody really heard anything about them as they were preparing for the apocalypse. As from there forward, not a whole lot's really known about them, but they are well known to just really, really hate the worm, and they're pretty okay with the wild and the weaver, but they just very dislike all people of the European descent that came over here. Though they do revere the wild and the worm and the weaver a little differently, They call them Grandfather Smoke, Grandfather Spider, and Grandfather Serpent. So it's kind of interesting that their patron is the Horned Serpent, which may lead to them maybe being secretly worm worshippers, but it's doubtful. Is there anything you would like to add, Riv?
Not really.
Alrighty then.
Just something to remember is that everyone has their own name for something like that. Something to remember is before the Weaver did a fucky wucky, the worm was just sort of doing its job. It was doing
It
something
was.
very normal and natural. So like them calling it something that isn't overtly sinister isn't that much of a red flag.
It isn't, no. But in the modern age, is kind of a concern due to what the Weaver has done. Is the thought process behind a lot of the concern of the wolves recently. Anyways, as it can be said, we are now done with tribes. Damn. I probably could have gone into a lot more detail about them, and there probably are things I could cover about them, but as of right now, I think we're fine. Now I would like to cover the interactions between werewolves, vampires, and mages, and also kind of changelings, demons, and wraiths, but not as much. So I don't have a slide for this one, sadly. I couldn't find a good image. Otherwise, I'll just put a stock wizard, werewolf, and vampire photo, but I feel like that would detract a little bit. So, werewolves and vampires don't like each other. Mages and vampires don't like each other. Werewolves and mages don't like. Nobody really likes each other.
Some important things to note. The werewolf vampire beef is entirely one-sided. The vampires 90% of the time couldn't give a shit that werewolves exist.
Oh,
But
they
there are
don't.
there are two things that go on with it. One, vampires unilaterally smell very slightly of worm corruption. Now, it doesn't
Yes.
matter whether they're Sabbat or Camarilla or Independent, they all smell very slightly of worm corruption, especially the Spot. The Spot reek of worm corruption.
Oh, they do. It's mostly because they're seen as weaver creatures, but they do have worm corruption as of their undead curse. Because a lot of what the worm is originally is the idea of gravekeepers, garbage men, so on and so forth. It's just taking the old and bringing it back into the new. The worm,
Entropy, just a natural
Yeah.
process of like slow decay and
Yep.
destruction. It just is what it is, or quick destruction.
Pretty much.
And like vampires like do have a thing with werewolves where werewolves they can't blood bond werewolves.
A
Werewolves will
little
just throw
hard.
the blood up. And werewolves also, with a single old World of Darkness exception, can't be embraced.
Yeah. Wait, there was the World Darkness exception? I didn't read
There
about
was
that.
a single exception. It's a named character from like a big like narrative book series. It is 100. So like breezing through this, right? Like usually what happened was when a vampire attempted to embrace a werewolf, the werewolf would violently seizure until it finally died because it has blood again, and it would violently seizure and die.
Oh.
There is exactly one instance where a werewolf was successfully embraced and it got upsides and downsides. The upside is that it can basically stay in its war form near indefinitely without consequence, because back in Old World of Darkness, you were entirely lucid in your war form, like at all times.
Yeah.
More or less. I mean, you did have to keep control, but like, you could just stay in it if you really wanted to. You shouldn't. It's bad for you, but
Terrible decision, really.
at least from what I remember. But the big thing is that like he got the vampire benefits, right?
Yeah. Was it specified what clan he was, or?
No, I don't
Okay.
know. I don't know off the top of my head. Um,
Fair enough.
he got all the benefits. He got all the downsides of being a vampire too.
Oh.
He also had a bad thing. So werewolves normally have regeneration. It's how they
Yes. Werewolves can take a lot of shots in their war form and just be basically eh.
Yeah. he lost the regeneration because he was undead and his flesh didn't knit itself anymore. He had to use
Ooh.
he had to use vampire like blood magic, not like actual thaumaturgy, just like using the power of the blood in order to heal himself. Um,
I can see that being very
because he had
unbeneficial.
access to both werewolf incarnate magic and blood power, he was stupid powerful. Like he would interact with vampires a lot. Werewolves fucking hated him because of what he was.
Nah, really.
Most vampires hated him because of what he was. The issue is he was a creature that could turn into a monster without the flesh crafting discipline, with no trouble whatsoever, and then proceed to cast spells in that form. He was not actual spells, but
That is
blood
terrifying.
magic in
Yeah.
that form. Blood magic in that form. He was overtly terrifying and horrifically powerful.
Yeah, I can see that being very detrimental to anyone on his other side.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And as for mages, I imagine they don't really like werewolves or vampires all too much anyway because they're mages. But
I mean, they don't like vampires because vampires cause active problems for them sometimes. Like the Order of Hermes has had a spat with Zamisi and Tremere, especially
man, I wonder
Tremere,
why.
distinctively Tremere, the
Us
Masasa
looking at
War.
last episode, looking at Tremere.
The Masasa War.
Oh, my Sasa War.
Masasa War. Um, and like vampires cause problems for mages. Like they're both, and the technocracy especially does not like either of them because they're supernatural creatures.
Okay, technocracy doesn't like anything to do with magic or the spiritual world anyway, even though they're using that shit.
Correct.
They're hypocritical.
But like as an example, the Sons of Ether, one of the mage factions, one of the traditions, literally could not care about vampires. It's like, yeah, they exist. They're not interesting. We're moving on.
Okay, that's fair enough.
They drink blood, they die in the sun, and they stop moving when you stake them. We have more cool shit to figure out, like how
We
to make an
never did
airship.
really go over that in the vampire episode, I realized.
What?
Vampire weaknesses.
I mean,
We could do that a different time. We can do that when we go over. We can do that when we go over Hunter.
yeah, we'll do that. We'll go over easy ways to kill them. Like I'll go over easy ways to kill all of these things when I go over Hunter. It'll be great.
To be honest, 95% of the time it's fire.
By the way, yeah, most of the time it is just fire. That's the worst part.
Yeah, it's literally for everything. It's normally just fire. Fire is strong.
No
But yeah,
shit.
there's some mage interactions. We got a little interesting. But now it's time for the important part. That's not the symbol I was hoping for, but you know what?
Oh,
I can go.
mages. I did actually want to talk about something about
Oh,
mages.
yep, go ahead.
One last thing. Something really neat and important. Kinfolk can actually awaken. Awakening is the process of your becoming a mage. I'll explain it more in the
Yeah.
mage episode. But like when you awaken, you gain the ability to cast spells in the way a mage would. Blood magic and werewolf powers and hedge magic, which is what's used by the faction known as the Arcanum. Also, yes, man have fire,
Fire is
man
strong.
Used by the Arcanum and other like minor casters, isn't considered real magic. Kinfolk can become mages, which means werewolves, if they're very lucky, and the said mages don't get pulled into the Ascension War, can have unironic mage fire support.
That does sound kind of insane.
My big thing is I don't know if werewolves would count as sleepers and therefore cause extra paradox. So that's something I'll have to
I
look up.
I mean,
I know vampires don't count for that,
I would
so mages
figure I would
will.
figure werewolves wouldn't if vampires don't.
That's the thing, though. Werewolves have a really funky soul, so they might and might not simultaneously, which means they do count for extra paradox.
Yeah, it's fair enough, I guess. I mean, it's like saying like a changeling would count, I guess, but they don't. So whatever.
No, changelings don't because their soul is legitimately just a fey soul.
Yeah. Anyways, but yeah, there's that.
Distraction over. Continue.
Right. Continuing on, we now have to talk about Banes and Fomori, which I again don't have an issue for image for because they were kind of not really an image thing. I could probably find it.
Just throw back up the Black Spiral Dancers image.
I pretty much. I hit a button.
I don't know. Oh, yeah, you hit a button. Oh no, I'm gone. Another ad.
Oh, best power dances. So Banes and Fomori. Banes and Fomori are essentially evil spirits or corrupt spirits of the worm that have been sent to the mortal plane to cause havoc, normally in different ways. They can be either ecological or it can be more
Oh,
in the sense of just metaphysical.
wait, that begs the question. In New World of Darkness, do they have the trifold worm or whatever they call it?
Yes.
Okay, good. I didn't know if you were going to talk about that or not.
I wasn't going to address it myself, but if you want to address it, you can.
I feel like it's important. The worm is a creature of entropy. It does not normally have the ability to create. It would not
It does
have that.
not.
Unfortunately, while it was trapped in its little box, while the Weaver stuck it in the box that it literally can't escape from, it went mad. It went literally like clinically
Oh yeah,
psychotic.
it's insane.
So what it did was it effectively tried to force the status quo back into being
Yes.
and grew two more heads. The wheeled worm and the weaver worm, they have specific names. I'm just going to call them that. But like so, and what it does is it creates these creatures of empathy in a mockery of the weaver in order to help it break out of its box and fulfill its purpose. These are banes.
Yes. But as we were saying, so Banes tend to be these spirits that will basically cause problems. Normally, how they do it is they possess things. It really just depends. Mostly, it's something that is akin to them. Normally to drive the worm's agenda and become Fomori. A Fomori is more of a physical manifestation of what a Bane is. Fomori can be pretty much pure monsters to just anything you want to be. So, say for instance, a Fomori is that of rage. A rage Fomori can possess an angry biker, and slowly but surely, the biker will, maybe he just wants to start a fight. Maybe he wants to speed on the road to piss somebody off. But slowly but surely, that will start to turn more and more. It'll go from just starting a fight to gutting somebody in the streets to becoming a serial killer to maybe just outright just blowing a building to smithereens if he really felt like it. Whatever fed the rage. Or it can be something more interesting, like, you got an old woman who's just very, very annoyed that her beauty went away. So a Bane comes along and just slowly slips into her and makes her a Fomori. Where slowly but surely, she'll just start off by massacring women and tearing their faces off to becoming the manifestation of disgust itself, causing wallpaper to rip from the walls and buildings to start sagging whenever she comes near them. There is also an interesting idea where Fomori or Banes can be not just human, but Banes can possess animals. There is a interesting case I like to address of, for instance, the frogmen of Loveland, which I always laugh and talk about because the Loveland frogmen are great. But the idea of a Bane accidentally having its original target killed. Say it's following a man who's a herpologist who studies frogs, and a frog kills him, not out of malice, but out of just pure defense. Well, that poisoned frog crawls into the man's skull cavity and lays itself there as the Bane slowly takes it over, causing the body to morph. Large, blackened bulge eyes, a frog mouth, frog abilities to jump high, start fusing with that human body, making it more frog-like. And as the Bane, makes its changes as it needs be, it becomes a disgusting Fomori, known for serial killing and killing things as soon as it gets near it. So on and so forth. To make very easy, Banes and Fomori do have different several power levels, and they can't be scaled properly. Some are just your newspaper bad to, that's Godzilla. But it really just depends. And honestly, there are a lot of interesting things you can do. A lot of the time, Banes and Fomori tend to be the main antagonist of Werewolf the Apocalypse games, but there are other things you can work with, such as vampires or mages. It really just depends on your preference. Would you like to add anything to what I have said, Riv?
Yeah, something to note is that if a werewolf kills somebody possessed or that is currently has a bane following or possessing them, that can like grievously injure or just straight up kill the bane.
Yes.
Um, in one instance during something that we may or may not get around to talking about eventually called the Midnight Carnival, Someone being possessed by a mind flayer bane. I don't know if those still exist, but got fucking gutted by a werewolf.
Yeah, werewolves are
then
basically the main defense force against banes and the worm.
Yeah. It then proceeded to flee into another person, like who was close by, just due to the fact that it didn't want to get lit up by the werewolf.
Yeah,
But that's an entire other thing.
it's neither here nor there.
Also, something else to note about Formori that you did not mention: Pentex.
Yes.
Pentex will has a big group of shell companies, big group of like research laboratories that it funds that literally pump out Formori.
That is true. They basically genetically, well, air quote, genetically engineer from Mori, essentially. And it is a fucking hell of a process. They made some fucked up shit.
Oh, it's nightmarish.
Oh, it's pure chimera nightmare fuel. It's a fucking Cazador.
Holy shit, Shao Tucker.
God damn it. Anyways, so
hey, listen, I got to make a Full Metal Alchemist reference. I'm satisfied.
You know what? That's fair enough. Oh god, that anime still gives me nightmares. Anyway, so we have basically covered everything that I would like to cover when it comes to werewolf, except for one thing. It's time for the Hen Yokai. Or the Hen Yokai, depending on how you want to pronounce them. So, these are your Asian shifters. These are the ones that have mostly made it out alive against Garu society and have banded together to create their own form of government, under known as the Council of the Beast, or also just known as the Table of Beasts. This is majority of Asia, consisting of majority China, Korea, the Steppes region, while competing with other vampires and werewolves. India and majority of Japan. There is also some further down, like the islands of Java, also the Philippines. But it really depends on how far you want to go. I'm not going to go super duper deeper in detail of them, because to be honest, there's not a lot to address when it comes to them, because they do function very similarly to werewolf. There's only one tribe per, and they're normally just referred to by what their actual species name is. So without any further ado, I will start addressing the different ones. I mentioned these earlier. They're the Haken, which are your typical werewolves or Garu. They function the exact same as their more western counterparts, and there's not really much of a change. A lot of them tend to consist of more just tribes have kind of just started moving over to the east, to be honest. There are the Khan, which are were-tigers, which are on my screen. Very self-explanatory. They are not really, they're not, mind you, a lot of these guys are not called Garu anymore, because Garu is more of a werewolf term. They're just simply referred to as Khan, or Khan.
Something big to remember is werewolf is like Garu is the werewolf term for werewolves, not for the other changing breeds. The other changing breeds, at least in old World of Darkness, had their own names for themselves. At least the ones. So speaking of which, hey, before we cover these guys, do the were spiders still exist?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
They do.
Like
depressingly.
The Weaver's kind of a shit, but like I like the were spiders. They're neat.
They're interesting. So, like I said, there are the Khan who are were-tigers, and majority of them are warriors for the most part, pretty heavy into that type of stuff. There are the Kitsune, which are were-foxes, and they're mostly tricksters, a lot of spiritual stuff. They tend to mess with people. Komo, which are were-spiders, and they're also trickster spirits, but they tend to keep away from society as best as they can and kind of try to live quiet lives. If they do live in cities, it's mostly to just consume those who live there. They don't really. A lot of these don't really care about the worm, the wild, or the weaver too much, but they do care in some aspects. Like for instance, the Como mostly care about the weaver spider joke. There are the Naga, which are were serpents, and their whole shtick is they're were serpents. They're big fucking snakes with arms. I don't know what else you want from me on that one. There are the Nezumi, which are were-rats. We kind of can cover them a little bit, but they're very similar to, well, traditional rats, to be honest. They have their own all these creatures have their own war forms and humanoid forms and so on. And were-rats are mostly just kind of seen as kind of like the, how do I even describe them properly? I guess the best way to describe were-rats is they're kind of like the bone gnawers because they're part of the same kind of grouping, but they don't work like freedom fighters. They're mostly just scavengers and try to live day by day. There is the Sambito, which are weresharks, which I'm pretty sure that guy in the middle there is supposed to be a wereshark, to my knowledge, in humanoid form. But they are known also as very heavy warriors. They are also pretty spiritualist. But as far as I'm aware, they mostly just worship the wild and don't really care much about the worm or the weaver. And they don't really, again, they don't really see the worm as like evil. They see the worm as just, necessary. There's also the Tengu, which are were ravens, which are also right over there, I believe that's their war form. And they are mystics, wizened creatures. They're mostly that of wisdom, and they're, of course, are worshippers of Raven. Most of these are pretty self-explanatory what they worship, because they're normally pretty simple. As for the last of the were creatures, they are the Zanlong, or were dragons. They are the descendants of the Black Dragon and the Scarlet Queen, and they are your typical Eastern dragons. They are long snake beings and are very well known in their war forms for causing literal nations to burn. As it can be said, if it was not for the Garu causing a call to the shifter species, the Zanlong would probably be the strongest shifter species. The problem is they're also incredibly rare, and they are not often to breed because they act like actual dragons that can live for a very long extended period of time, unlike other shifters which live for normal humanoid periods of time or maybe a little longer. But as for Hen Yokai, that's pretty much all I got. Is there anything you'd like to add to the end of this episode, Riv?
There used to be like the lizard ones. Like I don't remember the lizard ones.
I know what you're talking about. I just didn't have them covered.
Yeah, no, they at least in Old World of Darkness, they were incredibly rare, not because like they were actually particularly rare, but because due to the type of changing breed they were basically and ad break shit, but they were basically the only time they were all lizard,
The
and
Mokel.
the only time they could shift was like during like a full moon.
Yes, they're one of
So
the
like
surviving changing breeds that can shapeshift into were lizards and were crocodiles.
yeah, it really sucked for them because in Old World of Darkness they just kind of got screwed.
Yeah, as far as I look into them, they're mostly now in 5th edition. I did look into them. I just didn't really mention them because honestly, they weren't that important in my opinion.
They're
Um,
not.
they're all basically
Like,
now just South America and Asia.
Well, it's like why you're not mentioning the were-boar because they're fucking extinct.
Yeah, pretty much. Which, I mean, there are still were-bears and stuff as well. I just didn't really mention them because
They're all were-bears. Shit. Man.
there are were-bears and stuff. I just didn't really mention them.
Here's the thing. Thanks to the Midnight Circus, assuming that setting remains, there will always be a were-bear thanks to it.
That is true. I'm also going to transition us over to the talking screen. I have the talking stick. Anyways, but that is pretty much the summary of today's stream. We're under an hour of what we did yesterday. I probably could put
that was significantly more orderly and less autistic than what I did.
It's because I like being orderly, and I had. Okay, wait. So breaking like the whole like fourth wall here. Do you want to know how many pages of actual script I have?
How many?
5. I have
Shit.
5 pages of script that are all bullet pointed.
Damn, fourth wall break.
A little bit, yeah. I was reading off majority of my script, also spitballing and reading off the wiki a little bit, but I mean, shit, it worked, didn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be our episode on Werewolf the Apocalypse. If you have questions or anything like that, I would suggest
you're running into this with an actual script and not bullet points and pure memorization and autism and the wiki when need be.
I like being organized. You know this.
I do know this.
But as it stands, that was our Werewolf episode.
I'd be freaking out about somebody saying that on Twitch, but Kirsha was fucking yelling that a few streams ago, so that was fine. We're okay.
What? Yeah,
dude. Like people yell some really fucking raw things on Twitch sometimes. Yeah, ad sucky timing. Yeah.
The ad was terrible timing. Yeah.
when they add stop, I'll go ahead and tell Reaper about how basically like the lizard one didn't matter, which sucks.
Yeah, I did look into a few of the different other shifters, but all of them were just kind of they were either kind of boring or extinct.
Well, like that's the issue, right? Like but because of the fucking because of the war between the like that the Garu started with the other changing breeds, the rest of the changing breeds either went extinct or got like majorly screwed out of what they were made to do.
Pretty much.
Like as the thing, like Reaper, you missed the whole like lizard thing. The lizard guys
The
like
Maku.
don't really matter because like they are 99% of the time they're lizards and they can only actually shapeshift at all when it's like a full moon or something, like at most a once a month thing. And when it stops being that day, they're forcibly turned back into lizards.
Yeah, Komodo dragons, crocodiles, things like that. They're mostly
Monitor
found in the
lizards, fucking bearded dragons, like
yeah.
no offense, like they had an important role, and then they ended up like this, and it was not great for them.
Yeah, they mostly just don't exist anymore, which is kind of a shame. Like wereboars, and there's only at least one. There's at least one notable werebear left, which we might
Well,
cover in the Dark Carnival episode.
notable is not what I'd call it. Notable, unfortunate, deeply
Surviving,
unfortunate. I mean, yeah.
alive. Yeah, we're not getting far with this one.
We're probably not
Anyway,
gonna end up covering the Midnight Circus because that is a lot. It's a lot of bullshit to talk about, and
I do want to cover the what was it, the Dark Carnival you called it or something like
the
that?
Midnight Circus. It's called the Midnight Circus.
Yeah, I do want to cover it, but that is going to be a
It's
lot.
yeah, it's a specific setting source book for like Old World of Darkness. It's very
I mean, at
cool.
least we're not talking about the charnel houses of Europe.
Listen, the reason why we're not
I'd be
talking about that is because
scared.
Twitch will ban us, not because we don't
Twitch would
want to.
Twitch would murder me. That's not
Yeah,
even funny.
it's unironically a really cool and well made, like well thought about book by the people who made it. It's just,
I
it's
like
it,
living.
yeah, it's.
I like having a channel.
Are we allowed to talk about Mustache Man? Are
I
we like?
don't even think it's a good idea. No, I like keeping
Yeah,
my life. It
heavily
involves the Second
discusses
World
the
War. That's
it
all that
heavily
needs to be said.
discusses the actions of Mustache Man.
Yeah, it's a Wraith book, isn't it?
It primarily.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, but as it stands, that was our episode for today on Werewolf the Apocalypse. Meet us next Tuesday for when we discuss our good and funky fresh friends over in Mage. And then after that, we will be discussing Wraith in the Grand Lands of the Umbra. And
Yeah,
after
for
that,
anyone
we'll
wondering,
figure it the
the
fuck
big
out.
thing, yeah, the big things I want to cover in Mage, and I'm gonna try and go over as like a little more detailed, are the 9 mystic traditions, or also the 9 spheres of magic, which I'll probably cover with each of the traditions. Yeah,
Yeah,
damn mages.
mages.
I for two of the seats, I am going to cover like who used to sit in them and why they left, as well as I'm also going to cover the technocracy and who was there and who left, and who's there now and why they're the bad guys with bad intentions that used to be good guys with good intentions. And skim over mage history so you get a good rounded view without any actual depth or detail. Like jumping into the shallow end of a pool, but it's just a puddle.
Yeah, pretty much.
I hate to say it, but like
I
if
mean,
you want to
as
go really in depth with this stuff, it's a lot. There's a lot of it.
there is a
Um,
lot. I mean, it's 30 years of information.
yeah, this is very much just
It's
trying
like
to like
trying to sit down and explain the entirety of the Horus Heresy in one sitting. It's not going to fucking happen.
it's just trying to wet your palate on it. I really do personally enjoy the mage stuff because both of the factions are like, mage. Mage lets me talk about really stupid bullshit, and I get to mention stuff. I get to mention stuff from effectively outside of the world of darkness during Mage because it's canon. It's great.
Yeah.
I love it. Um, but like both of the factions are intrinsically entwined together just because of how they happened, because of how they were founded, kind of like the Cameron and the Spot, with the exception of both sides like
are kind of the good guys and also aggressively the bad guys in every situation.
Yeah, it's a mess.
Except for the technocracies really trying hard to be the bad guys a lot of the time now.
Yeah, there's the whole war on Saturn or whatever, but we'll get to that.
That's not the bad guys. The fuck do you mean? That's not the bad part of them.
I know. I never said it was bad. I just thought it was entertaining.
Look
Oh,
at
you know what I
do it.
forgot to address about Pentex?
Do it.
Right. So really quickly about Pentex, real quick. So I did address it slightly. Is that we did address slightly that they do put Banes in their stuff and demons.
Uh-huh.
So there's this. So I like talking about O'Tooleys a lot because I think it's funny. There is a burger chain in the World of Darkness called O'Tooleys. They are known for putting Banes and demons in their burgers to make you beat your wife, as well as they have a beer company that they also have that they put demons into to also make you beat your wife.
Holy shit!
That is actual solid baked in lore into the game. They are known for putting Banes and demons into their food just to make you, beat your wife, start an arson, abuse your kid. They do make you do all the horrible shit. But it's so minor that it can just be considered regular common law. Oh, hello, Leo. The hell are you still doing up? More importantly, you caught me right at the end.
Oh my
Great
fucking
time to
God.
come in to be talking about people beating their wives. What do you mean I'm still up? I just woke up. Oh, okay, you just woke up. Never mind then. Yeah,
What
you
if they
just missed
called
the
it-
you just missed the 3-hour werewolf rant.
What if they called it O'Freakies and instead of making you beat your wife?
Shut
they
the
made
fuck
freak-
up. Shut the actual fuck up, please. Oh my gods. But TLDR on the whole stream, everybody who came to this point in time instead of watching the whole 3-hour VOD, werewolves are furries and they're also pretty angry. LMAO. I don't like werewolves either, don't be wrong. I wanted to cover werewolf because I thought it would be interesting, and yeah, it is. But holy fuck, it's just a lot of angry furries doing angry furry shit.
Yeah, like here's the thing, right? Like I have generally pretty high opinion of Werewolf. I think it's very fun as like a fantasy. The big thing is like outside of that, it's very much like in Hunter the Parenting, how they said how hunters view it as they're pagans waging a war you can barely understand. Because
It is.
at the point in Werewolf where most people are playing, yeah,
I mean,
most
yeah,
people are
there is some of that, Leo.
yeah,
It's a little
yeah,
more complex.
yeah, at the point in which in like the 2000s when like base like old World of Darkness was playing,
I'll say it's like 2002
Mod-
when the end of the world happens, doesn't it?
2004.
Okay.
2002, 2004 around there. The thing is that actually 2002, yeah, because that's when Chronicles of Darkness dropped.
Yep.
Yeah, he made a joke.
Yeah, I know what you're referencing, Leo, don't worry.
Werewolf players are basically competing not just against the worm, not just against the weaver, but against the myriad of failings and inaction of their forefathers and forebears, and need to are constantly struggling to pick up the slack of the people of their own kind who failed to fix the problem in the past.
Pretty
Because
much.
they're so busy talking about their past glories and victories that have to this point in that day amounted to nothing. It's about raging against the dying of the light, raging against the dying of the world, when there is obviously no hope for victory.
In the world of darkness, there is no hope. But yeah, that's Werewolf. As a general understanding of it, from what I've given from the lore, from what I've read, and from what Riv understands, honestly, I think it's a pretty solid setting, and I do like it.
Oh,
Would I play a game of it? Maybe. Would it be maybe a one shot? But I don't think I go that much further. I honestly, out of what we covered so far, aka just basically Vampire Werewolf, there's a higher chance of me playing Vampire than Werewolf. I'm gonna just keep it $150. I mean, I've played.
I played a little. I played a bit of Vampire. Vampire's fun, but circling back around
Yep, go ahead.
To Hope. Next Tuesday, like you said, next Tuesday we're talking about Mage and their hopes of winning the Ascension War, even though
Which I have no idea what the fuck that is, so it'll be an entertaining experience.
The cards are so hilariously stacked against them due to their own inaction that it's basically a guaranteed loss.
Honestly, if there's one thing I've noticed about the World of Darkness, It is that basically everybody's screwed because of their own inaction.
You know what? You know what happens? End stream after I say this. Be very funny and don't question me on this. There's an entire Mage the Ascension end game scenario where rather than trying to where the ascension is about to happen, the world's about to end, and like the Mage Ascension is about to happen, and there's one marauder attempting to stop the end of the world, and it's your job as a party to kill him before he succeeds.
Oh. Yeah, all right. Anyway, good night, everybody. I'll see you when I see you.
I'll explain what a marauder is Tuesday. Bye.
Bye! And I will see you all next time.